So I'm going to introduce you to the project that we're going to build as you go through the various lectures within this course. Ultimately, big picture here, we're going to build a template inside of Microsoft Excel that's going to help us manage and track our monthly expenses. This template is going to contain two different worksheets. One, it's going to contain this worksheet right here called the monthly expense dashboard. And you can see all the goodies that we got out here. You're going to build this one from complete scratch. It's going to contain various tables. It's going to contain some graphics, some charts, a pivot table, all to help us manage our finances and track where is our money going. The second worksheet is the expense tracker. This guy right here. We're going to build this table so that every day as you're going through the month, you pay your bills, whether that's your rent, your mortgage, your insurance, your car payment, your credit card, your internet bill, your phone bill, whatever it is. Every day as you pay those, you'll enter those bills right here. As you do that, we'll start to populate the dashboard with that information. And both of these, we're going to build from complete scratch. We'll see various formulas to use, like the sum if, the count A, the offset function. We'll take a look at some formatting tricks that we can use to format our content. We'll create simple charts, and we'll create more complex custom charts to be able to populate our dashboard. So that's what we're going to build, but let's see it in action right here. So I'm going to hop to my monthly expense dashboard, and I'm going to imagine it's now a new month. The new month has started up, and I want to start out my template for that month. So we got three categories here for our various expenses. We got our bills, our expenses, and any subscriptions that we have, like monthly subscriptions like Netflix or a software service or whatever it happens to be. So I'm going to drop in a few bills here. And see, I'm going to anticipate that we got things like rent, we got car, whether that's your car payment or your insurance. We got your health insurance payment. We've got water. We got garbage, right? So on and so on. I can populate that data right here. Now I can give it some due dates. I can give it some expected amounts. Let's say for rent, I'm going to be paying $1,200 a month. Car is going to be, let's say this is the payment. I got a $150 monthly payment. Health insurance is $200. Water is $40. Garbage is $20. And I'm making some stuff up here. But I'm filling out the initial bills that I'm going to expect for this month. Maybe I've got some expenses, things like food, and I'll budget $500 for food a month. Is that good? I don't know. We've got kids, right? How much am I going to spend on kids? $100? All right, and so on, right? We'll drop these in here. Maybe I got car repair. I'm going to expect for this month that we've got a repair that needs to happen. I'm going to budget $400 for that car repair. Right, as I'm filling that out, we're going to start to see some of the data come to life within this dashboard. For example, I'm starting to see a budget versus actual chart start to populate with some data. Now, maybe I'll put a subscription in there. Let's do Netflix. All right, so some expected bills, expenses, and subscriptions for the month. Now, as the month rolls up and we start to pay these bills, I'll hop over to the expense tracker where I'll actually track the bills that I've paid. So now I've got a nice little drop down with those bills that I just input. So let's say we got rent, and that was due, or I paid that on the 6th, and it was for $1,200. And then maybe I've got, I went to the store, bought food. I did this on the 2nd. And I spent $200. And then the kids needed something, right? And I paid maybe a school fee for the kids. And I did this on the 10th, and I paid $50 inside of a school fee. So now I'm starting to fill out the expense tracker here. As I go back to the monthly dashboard, now it's really starting to come to life. I've got some values inside there that's being pulled back from that tracker that we just filled out. I can see how much we actually spent on some of those bills. My charts are starting to populate. I can see a budget versus actual amount in there. I can get a percentage of bills, expenses, and subscriptions. 0% for subscriptions right now because I didn't pay my Netflix bill. Let's pay that really quick. Netflix. I paid that on the 12th, and it was for $12.99. All right, there we go. It's in there, and now I've got a 1% for my subscription rate inside there. All right, now I can also fill out income. It's not only about what's going out, but we want to know about what's coming in as well. So perhaps I've got a paycheck. I'll say this is number 1, and I received this on the 6th, and it was for $2,400, right? So now I'm starting to see, again, it come to life here. I've got my various tables where I can get a breakdown for each of the categories. I've got some charts that are populating. I've got some nice little tags or call outs here for me. And then I've got a pivot table. Pivot tables need to be refreshed. So I click into that table. I can go to Pivot Table Analyze, and I'll refresh that. And I'm starting to get that data from the expense tracker and a nice little chart showing me where my money's going. Holy cow, right? But this is what we're going to build. We're going to go through several lectures from the ground up. We're going to build a personal budget template to help us manage our income, manage our bills. Where's the money going? Right? All right here through 2 little tabs. Monthly expense dashboard, where we can get all the graphics, get high level data, and then the low level where we can see what's actually happening here. And we can track our expenses. So get ready. We're going to jump in and we're going to take a look at how to build this. And I'm going to throw a few other topics in there towards the end of the course. We'll talk about a couple of functions like the loan payment calculator, the investment calculator, and working with Excel data tables. So get ready. Let's jump in. Now, as we go through the various lectures, the videos within this course, we're going to be working with an example file that I'm going to provide for you. And I want to encourage you to download this file so you can follow along with me and create your own personal budget template. To find this file, it's going to be attached right here to this lecture. So if you're looking at the main page, the main video there, off to the right, you'll see your lecture panel. And on lecture number 3, you'll find course exercise files, download here, and you'll find a resource button. You can give that a click, and you'll find the personal finances-01 Excel file. Make sure you download that because that's what we're going to use throughout this course, talking about all the various techniques that we're going to use to build this table to track our expenses. So pause the video really quick before you move on to the next, find that resource and download it to your computer. And then open it up because we're going to jump into the course and start to build out the template. As a quick reminder, and for those that haven't taken a course on this platform before, there is in each course a Q&A section, a place where you can go and ask questions, read questions from other students, get responses to questions, even respond yourself to other people's questions. This is the Q&A board, and I want to encourage you to participate in the Q&A board. You can ask your own questions as you go through the lectures. If something's not quite ringing a bell for you, there's something just not lining up for you, ask your question. You create a formula inside of an Excel document, it's not working for you, ask the question. And best, when you ask your question, leave a snapshot. Take a screenshot of what you're seeing and post it inside your question as well, because that helps me and my team to answer your question better. All right, to find the Q&A section, on the main course page, just below the video player, you'll see a series of buttons: Overview, Q&A, Notes, and so on. If I click on the Q&A section, you'll find down below where you can ask questions, read about other questions from other students, respond, and so on, all right here. So once again, I encourage you, use the Q&A board, not just in this course, but any course that you take. Ask your questions. That's where you're going to learn. All right. Let's jump into the course and let's take a look at building and managing your personal finances inside of Excel. In this section of the course, we're going to be covering the initial setup of our Microsoft Excel document for our personal budget. We're going to do things like set up the initial tables, get a little bit of formatting out of the way, and really just get basic structural elements in place. Now, before we do that, I want to make sure that you've opened up the exercise file that I'm going to be using, and if you'd like to, that you can use to follow along with me. So this file is called Personal Finances-01, and it's a Microsoft Excel document. Now, if you haven't downloaded this file yet, it's 2 lectures earlier. Look for the course exercise files, download, and get this file downloaded on your system and open it up in front of you. So here's just a really quick tour of what this file currently contains. So again, it's the Personal Finances-01 document. And in here, you can see that we have a few different worksheets. We've got one called Expense Tracker, one for Monthly Expense Dashboard, a Loan Payment Calculator, Investment Calculator, and one called Data Tables. Now, the Monthly Expense Dashboard is currently empty. Nothing on it. Well, that's because this is the worksheet that we're going to build out ourselves. The Expense Tracker is also empty because we're going to build a nice little table right here to track all of our monthly expenses. The Data Tables worksheet is also empty because we're going to talk about data tables and we're going to build some of our own. The Loan Payment Calculator, though, does have some basic structure here. It's got a couple of tables, it's got a couple of formulas, places for us to input values, but it is missing one key component, the monthly payment formula. So we're going to talk about the payment function built into Excel, and we'll see how to use it here to help us calculate a monthly payment based on some set terms, like the principal amount, the interest rate, and the term. So we'll get into that here shortly. The investment calculator also has some basic structure in there, some tables, some formulas, some input cells, but it's missing again one key element. In this case, we need the final amount calculation. So here we're going to talk about a pre-built function inside of Excel called the future value function, or FV, and we'll get into that here shortly. So for now, make sure you've downloaded the file, Personal Finances-01, get it open in front of you, and let's go to the Monthly Expense Dashboard worksheet. This is where we're going to start building out the basic structure for our budget template. Let's get going. So the first table that we're going to start to build out here is going to be our bills table. This table is going to contain a handful of columns, things like the bill name, the date it's due, the amount that we expect to pay, the actual amount that we paid for the bill, whether that was below the bill amount or maybe we paid a little bit more, such as a credit card, and we'll have a difference column between the bill amount and the actual amount. So let's build out this table. I am currently in the Personal Finances-01 workbook, and I'm going to start out working on the monthly expense dashboard. Now this worksheet currently empty because we're going to start to build out all of these resources. By the end, this worksheet is going to be a very dynamic, a very interactive dashboard type interface. We'll have several tables, charts, and so on. So let's build out our first table, bills. We're going to start out by building out the headers. Now I'm going to pick some spot on here. We're going to probably end up moving this table around to adjust and make space for other elements. But for right now, I'm going to drop down to column B, row 13, so B13. And I'm going to start out with my headers. So my first one, I'm going to call it bill. So this will be for the bill name. I'll tab over. We're going to have a due date. We're going to have an amount, the amount for the bill. We might have a bill for our rent. So our amount there, expected amount, is going to be whatever that happens to be. Say $1,000. That's my monthly rent. Okay. I'm going to tab over again. We'll have the actual, what we actually paid there. Some bills, like rent, maybe that's going to be consistent, and we'll say, oh, every month I pay $1,000. So the amount is this, and the actual is $1,000. That's what I paid. But then you may have a bill such as a credit card, and that's due every month. I might pay the minimum amount on that credit card. I might pay more to pay off that bill faster. So we got the actual in there as well. I'll tab over one more time. And here I'm going to create a column for difference. I want to know the difference between the amounts for the amount column, the actual bill amount, and the actual amount that I've paid. So whether that's plus or minus, right? You paid a little bit less, you paid a little bit more, whatever that happens to be. So this will be our initial table structure. Now down below that, we'll end up inputting some records here. So we'll get to that. We'll come back to that. But that's our basic structure of the table. Nail this down, and then we'll talk about actually converting this into a table so we can take advantage of all the features inside of Microsoft Excel. Now that we've got the initial setup, basic layout structure of our table, let's now do a little bit of formatting. Let's get this to actually look like a table. So all I'm going to do here is highlight my column headers, that row 13 values, and the row directly below it. So I'll highlight B13 all the way down to F14. I got the headers and one empty row for the table selected. Now, once that's selected, I'm now going to go to my Home tab. And on the Home tab, we have a section of tools in here called Styles. And one of the options is Format as Table. So I'm going to go ahead and give that button a click. This is going to give me a flyout menu with several different options for me to pick from. This is all about formatting. So I've got color choices essentially to choose from. We've got categories for light, medium, and dark. So this is totally up to you. We're going to see how you can modify this later on and do some really neat things with your worksheets presentation. But for now, I'm going to grab the medium category and I'm going to grab this nice top blue one here. But whatever you want to get, your favorite color is green or pink or whatever you like, grab that color, apply it to your table. So I'll grab this first one here. This is dark teal table style medium 2. I'll give that a click. I'm going to get a create table window. And you'll notice that that range of cells that we selected earlier is currently highlighted. It's in there. But we do want to make sure that my table has headers option is checked. That just lets Excel know that these are our headers. They're not an actual record within the table. So we got our range, headers, check, and I'll hit OK. And now we've got our table. So it doesn't look like a whole lot just yet. I mean, it does look more than we had earlier, but there's not a whole lot going on here yet. This little icon, lower right-hand corner, you see that tiny little tick mark there? That's how you can expand the table or resize the table. So let's say I want to get some additional rows here because I'm going to be eventually filling out records inside this table. Well, I'm going to grab that little tick mark in the corner and I'm just going to drag down. Let's see, we started in 13. I'll go to 23, right? Got a handful of rows there. I'll drop it and now I've got a nice little table. Mine happens to be alternating row colors, makes it a little bit easier to read, but now it's starting to look like a table. We got some formatting there. Try this out. Highlight the headers plus the row down below it. Go to Home, Format as Table, pick your style, and you're good to go. Try it out. All right, we've got our first table started. Basic structure there, column headers, rows. Now, I want to expand a little bit more on identifying this table. Eventually, we're going to have a few different tables on this worksheet, and I want to make sure it's clear what each table represents. So directly above the table, just right here inside of row 12, I want to place a title. Just a nice big header up there, identifying this as the bills table. We're going to use the feature called Merge Cells. So first I'm going to start out by going into B12, and I'm just going to label this. I'm just going to say bills. Just make it simple. This is the name of this table. But I want that title to be nice and big and centered within the table width. Eventually we'll change the column widths. Maybe the bills column needs to be a little bit wider to fit the name of all the different bills. The amount column needs to be a little bit wider, and so on. So I want that title to always be consistently centered within the table width. To do this, I highlight the group of cells that identify currently the width of the table. That's B12 to F12. With that selected, I'll go to Home. I'm going to go into the Alignment section, and I'll hit the Merge and Center option. Give that a click. It's now taken those, what is that, 5 cells, merged them all into one, and we got a nice little title there. So from here, we can do things like increase the font size, change the color, change the background color, whatever we want to do. So for right now, I'm going to make it bold. So I'll go to home, I'll hit the bold button or Control B, like bold on your keyboard, and maybe I'll bump up the font size. I'll go up to 16. Nice big title there. Everybody knows that, oh, this is the bills table. Because once again, eventually, off to the right, we'll create one for the expenses and one for the subscriptions and a few other elements on this dashboard. All right, try this out. Let's get a bills title directly above that table. Now that we've got a title on this table, I want that title to stick out a little bit more, and I want it to tie itself to the table directly below it. So we're going to add a border, just kind of sides and top of the bills cell. Really simple, just a nice little border. So I'm going to start out by selecting that cell. Remember, it's merged, so we got all of those cells together. Next step, I'll go to my Home tab. And inside of the font section, we've got our border command there. Now, as I go through and apply formatting to the various elements and discuss our table structure, don't feel like you have to follow the exact steps, same colors, same thickness, same borders, whatever it might be that we're covering. Feel free to experiment, try your own colors and so on. Or if you want to be boring like me, you can choose the exact same stuff, whatever you like to do. So I'm going to go into that border command, but I'm going to hit the little arrow next door. We've got all these presets that you can pick from, but I'm going to continue going all the way down to more borders. I'll give that a click. This will open up our Format Cells window, and we're on the Border tab. Now, on the right-hand side, we've got our border options. Essentially, this right here represents the cell or cells that we have selected. So what I can do is I can pick a style for my line. I'm going to do this nice thick one here. We'll grab that border. And if I'd like, I can pick a color for my border. Let's see, I'm going to grab this dark teal one. I think that's my headers there. So with that selected, got my style, got my color. I'm then going to click into the areas that I want to apply the border. In this case, I want to put it along the top, and I want to put it on the left and the right. I don't care about the bottom because that's already got a nice thick border represented by our column headers. So once that's done, I'll hit OK. If I click away from the cell, I've now got a nice border around that cell. It's something small, but it ties it into that table a little bit more, especially with your color choices that you pick or the thickness of the line. So make sure you try this out. Get a nice little border around there. If you'd like, you can change the background color, change the font color, whatever you like to do. Try it out. So our table's starting to look pretty good. We've got the table, we got the headers, we got a nice little title there with a little bit of formatting, and we've got some empty rows currently. Empty. Let's start inputting some records into this table. Now these records, I'm just going to make some stuff up. Feel free to do the same, or put your own personal records, your own bills into that table. Get some practical experience working with this data right now. Whatever you like to do. So first thing, we've got the bill column. This is where your bill name is going to be. So my first one I'll put in here is going to be rent, right? Every month I got rent. I got to pay the rent. I'll tab over. Let's see. Let's say my rent is due on the 6th of every month or by the 6th of every month. So I'll put in today's month. Now let's see. Today's, what is today? Today's September. So I'll say at least September as of this recording. Whatever month you're in, let's drop that in there. So I'll say 9/6/2023, tab over. I'll say it's $900 for the rent amount. I'll tab over again. Now the actual column, we're not going to input any value inside this column right now. Okay? So let's skip over that one. That value is actually going to come from someplace else, the area where we actually input when we pay the bill. So we'll come back to that one. The difference one, this is going to be a formula. So we'll come back to that one as well. So we got one record right now. Let's try one more. I'll hop down below, get into the bill. Let's see, I've got the water bill. So I've got my water title in there. I'll tab over. Let's say this one is due by the 10th of the month, 2023. And I anticipate it's going to be like $40. Call it good. Tab out of there again. Again, actual, we'll come back to that one. And the difference as well, we'll create that formula once we get the actual in there. So take just a couple of moments here and let's drop in a few bills. You can put 2, 3, 6, 10, whatever you like to put in there. And if you need to, you can always grab the little tick mark in the corner and drag that down to drop in a few more bills. Now keep in mind, these are the monthly consistent bills. I pay this bill every month. Rent, water, garbage, my credit card, my phone bill, my car payment, my car insurance, my health insurance, things like that. Try it out. Now that you've got a few records in there, let's apply a little bit of table data formatting. Things like currency. That amount that we have inside there for the bill, that should be formatted as a currency amount, right? A currency formatting. So let's try that one out first. First step, so I'm going to highlight all of the cells within there. Now I did expand my table out a little bit more in anticipation that there may be additional bills within this month. So if you'd like, you can pull that table down to row 30, roughly. If you got more than that, great, right? Wherever you're at inside there. But let's highlight those cells. With them highlighted, I'm just going to go to my Home tab. I'm going to go into the Numbers section, and I'll just hit the Currency formatting option there. Now, your currency, depending on what region of the world you're in, is going to look different, right? Or might look different. Mine, I've got the dollar currency symbol. I've got the decimal place in there, and I don't have anything over 1,000, but if I did, I can start bringing, or it would start to bring in the commas. Okay? So whatever formatting for currency you have in your region, we're good to go. Now, I don't currently have the actual or the difference, but I'm going to anticipate it. It'll come. So I'll just highlight those cells, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'll hit the currency formatting once again. Okay? Now, nothing currently showing up in there, but those cells are now formatted with the currency formatting. So once we drop in the values, the calculations, they'll already be formatted for us. Now, something else I like to do is the bill column and the due, and probably all of them, I want to increase the column width here just to give it a little bit of breathing room. So I can grab in between B and C here, right in between those two columns, and I'll just drag over a little bit just to increase the size, especially if you got something much larger like health insurance, right? We want to make sure that that fits in there. I'll do the same with the date, create a little bit of breathing room in that column, drag this over a little bit, and in anticipation of this, I'll make these a little bit wider as well. It's something small, but we do want that table to look good and make it easy to read. So let's get your currency in there. Let's increase your column width. And if you'd like to, you can do some formatting with your dates as well. If you'd like, you can grab that, hop up to your Home tab, Number section, and we can see it's currently formatted as a date. But if I hit the drop down, you do have a few different date formats you can choose from, as well as some more number formatting where you can get into some other options. So whatever you like to do. But let's get some formatting on this table. All right, we've got our initial table in there for bills. We got a header, we got columns, we got data in there, we got a little bit of formatting. Now, once you've formatted your lists as an actual table, remember we highlighted the headers in that first row. Whoop. We went to Home, we did Format as Table, and you picked a color. Once you applied that, you actually got several other options that come along with a table. I'm going to talk about one here. It's actually a feature that's on by default, but we're going to turn it off. We don't need it on this table, at least at this point. It's not going to fully serve our purposes for what we need on this table. But if you click into the table, doesn't matter where, just as long as you're in that table, you now have a Table Design tab here at the top of your screen. And as you can see, there is all sorts of goodies up here. Now, one of them we're going to turn off. At the top of each of our headers here, we've got the filter option. Okay? So we can filter the table. You may have used this inside of a list of your own. Well, here, we don't really need it. I want to be able to see the records. Eventually, we're going to chart based off of this and calculate based off of it and so on. My needs for tracking my budget doesn't include filtering. So I'm going to turn it off. So I click into the table, table design. We got a section in here for table style options. And one of them is filter button. So let's just turn that one off. Boop, gone. Now the little drop downs on our headers are gone. If you needed them later, for whatever reason, you want to filter and sort this table, you can go back to table design, filter button, and turn that back on. But let's try that out. Let's turn it off. We don't need it. We're not going to use it. Table design, turn that option off. Here's another option that we can turn on or off inside of our Excel table. Once again, we can click into our table. We can go to our table design tab. And again, you got all these goodies up there. We're going to talk about a few of them as we continue through these lectures. The first one we saw is you can turn off the filter buttons, those little drop downs at the top, right? The next one we're actually going to turn on. Still inside the table style options, there's an option in here for total row. Now, currently we have an amount column in here. Now, what I would really like to get out of this is a grand total, right? How much have we spent total for the month for our bills? Well, we could create a calculation of our own, but I want it to be built into the table. So I'll go to table design. I'll turn on the total row. This adds a new row at the bottom of the table. It'll always be at the bottom of the table. If you increase the table amount of records or decrease it or whatever, it'll always be there. But here, see it's called total. Off to the right, we got a 0 in there because it's actually already trying to calculate something, but the difference column is empty. If I click into that cell, we get a drop down, and here I can change the calculation applied to that cell. Well, it's trying to count it. Well, I don't want to count, and actually I don't want anything on this column, so I'm going to say none. But I am going to hop over right below amount, hit the drop down, and here I'll grab sum. There's my grand total. Now, as you update, as you add, as you delete, that number will update automatically for you. Now I'm going to go right next door to actual, and I'll do the same. Drop down, sum it up, call it good. Don't have anything in there currently, but we will eventually. So let's try this out. Let's get some totals in a total row within our table. Click into the table, table design, turn on the total row, and you can set them up right there. Try it out. Here's one more option that we're going to apply to our table within Microsoft Excel. Now, eventually, we're going to have calculations, formulas within the table, and we'll have formulas outside the table that reference the table itself or data within the table. Now, in order to make our calculations nice, neat, and clean, I want to give the table a name so that we can identify it by the name. Okay? So in this case, we got bills. Eventually, we're going to have expenses and subscriptions and other content. Well, when our formula references the bills table, I want to see, oh, this is the bills table. And we'll do that by naming the table. So if you click into the table, we'll go back to Table Design tab. And on the far left, you'll have table name. Now, you can call this whatever you like. Here, I'm going to call it TBL. It's a table. I'm just abbreviating here. TBL bills. TBL bills. Now, you'll notice if you look closely there, there's no space. I didn't say TBL space bills. This space is not allowed. You can't put spaces in your table names, so don't do it. All right? You got that? All right, no spaces. TBL bills. That sounds good. You can call it whatever you like. You just call it bills if you like, or bills table, or that sounds like it belongs to Bill. Bills table. But again, you can call it whatever you like. Table bills. All right, let's give it a name. I'm going to hit my enter key, and we're done. We've now got a table called TBL bills, or whatever you've called it there. Try this out. All right, we've built our first table. We've got the bills table, and we went through several steps to get that table set up. Now, here's a little bit of an exercise for you just to practice what we've gone through to create that initial table. I'm going to have you create 2 more tables. If you'd like, you can pause the video right here and use my tables as a reference. I want you to create an expenses table and a subscriptions table. You can see examples right here. So I've got my expenses table right here. Looks a lot like the bills. I've got an expense column for the name of the expense. We've got the budgeted amount that I anticipate I'm going to spend on that item during the month. We've got the actual, what I actually spent on that expense, and the difference column, right? The difference between those 2 columns. It's got headers along the top. It's got rows of records down below. We've got a nice little title there at the top with those merged cells. And we've got the total row inside there. And then I created a subscriptions table, just 2 little columns. The name of the subscription and the amount for the subscription. But it's got the headers, it's got the title at the top with the merged cells once again. It's got the total row. And I've also named each of these tables and turned off the filters within the tables as well. So try this out. You can pause the video, use mine as reference. You can create your own, but let's get something like these 2 tables right here. Again, the key here is just to practice. Repetitiveness is always great when learning something new. Practice building these tables like we did earlier. So try this out. Get these 2 tables built, and then we'll jump into our next exercise. All right, how'd that go for you? Did you get your 2 more tables in there? We got the bills. We created that one together. Now we got expenses, and we got subscriptions. Now again, there were several little steps that we took inside of there to build out those tables. And I love the consistency. They all look the same. They're going to contain different bits of data for us, but the visual appeal to them, they look the same. Now, we're going to create one more table here, and it's going to look just like these, but it's going to go on the expense tracker worksheet. I'm going to hop over to the worksheet just next door, expense tracker. Currently, it's empty. Well, we're going to build out another table much like the ones we generated earlier. This table is where we're going to actually input when we pay one of those bills, expenses, or subscriptions. Let's try it out. So I'm going to hop into a cell someplace. I'm just going to pick a cell. I'll say B3, and we can always move it around later on to fit our needs. Maybe I'll do B2. Let's just skip a row, skip a column. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add some headers. I'm going to add the table formatting and so on. And you know what? Actually, I'm going to go down to B3, and we'll see why here in a moment. So B3, I'll start with my headers. So we're going to call this the expense column. That's going to be the name of the expense. I'll tab on over. We're going to have the date we actually paid it, tab over. We'll have the amount, tab again, and we'll have the description. We'll describe what this bill was, right, if we need to. All right, that looks good. Now I'm going to highlight that row plus the row down below. What am I going to do next? I'm going to go to Home, and I'm going to go to Format as Table. And I'll just grab the same one again. I like the blue color. There's my table range. My table does have headers. Thank you very much. All right, there's the beginnings of my table. I'll drag that down a few rows. This one's going to be quite big. This is the one that we're going to input every bill, expense, or subscription that we pay during the month. The other tables that we built earlier will look to this table to see if we've paid it. Okay, we'll get to that later on. All right, what else do we need to do here? I'll click into the table. I'm going to go to the Table Design tab. I'm going to turn off the Filter button. I'm going to turn on the Total row. Cool. Let's see, it should actually be the second to last column. So I'll say none for the description, and I'll do a sum for the amount there. All right, what else? We need to name the table. So I click into the table, Table Design, hop over to the name, and I'll call this TBL Expense Tracker. All right, we got our table just about there. Let's see, we can do some additional formatting. Maybe I want the header. Remember, I went down a couple of rows. I'll grab those cells. I'll merge them together. I'm going to click into there. We'll call this the expense tracker. We can do some formatting on it. Whatever you did before, we'll apply it here. I like that thicker border. I like that one color. That looks pretty good. Top, left, right. Got a nice border on there. Bold, make that a little bigger. I'm going to anticipate that these are going to be quite a bit wider. Description, probably quite a bit wider. Let's see, that amount column, I'm going to grab those cells and I'll format them using the currency, right? Make sure that's nice and wide. And that table, I think that table's done. That looks pretty good. So let's knock that one out. You're going to follow those same steps that we did before, but now we're on the expense tracker worksheet, and you'll build out the expense tracker table. Make it look like your other ones. If you like, maybe you want to mix it up, change the color, right? Maybe I'm not going to go with the blue. Maybe I'll go with an orange or something else. But we'll create some variety here. Whatever you'd like to do. Let's get to that point right there, and then we'll carry forward. So we got the beginnings of our table created, the expense tracker table. Like I mentioned earlier, this is the table that every month you're going to open up this and you're going to start to input an expense every time you pay that expense. So I jump online to pay my credit card, right? I pay that online. I get my receipt, right? Maybe I download it. I put it in a folder on my computer, whatever you do, right? What your process is, but you've paid that amount. Now I'll open up my budget template and I'll jump to the expense tracker table and I want to fill this out. I want to say, this is the expense I paid, credit card. This is the date I paid it. This is the amount, and maybe I'll describe it. This is the Chase credit card, Visa card, whatever. I'll put that data inside there. Okay? And then I pay my mortgage the next day or my rent the next day. Then I'll input that here. Now, we built out those other tables earlier, right? The monthly expense dashboard. Well, these tables right here, we plan out our expenses, right? Every month we've got these bills, we got these expenses or anticipated expenses, we got these subscriptions. These are the tables that describe what we're going to be paying. But the expense tracker is what we actually paid. All right. Now, you might recall on the dashboard tables, we had an actual column. Right, there we go. And we could add one. Maybe we'll add one to the subscription as well. Okay, subscriptions, typically, that's what you pay, right? So that could actually be blank because when we pay it inside the expense tracker, we'll put the amount in here. And then these three tables, the actual will pull from that data. All right. Now, to make this easier, to make the expense tracker table easier for us to fill out, when I go into the expense column, let's say I'm going to put my rent as my first record in here. I would like a little drop-down menu. I click into the expense name, I click on a drop-down, and it gives me a list of all of my expenses. We're going to create a drop-down that will pull the names from these three tables right here. Now, there's a few different ways for us to do this. Okay? I am currently working inside of Excel through the Microsoft 365 subscription. This gives me access to several newer Excel functions. And these functions are going to help us to build this little dropdown. Now, unfortunately, if you're not on the Microsoft 365 subscription package, you're on 2016, you're on 2019 without the subscription, you're on 2010 of Excel. Unfortunately, you won't have these functions that I'm going to discuss here. But there are other ways to do this. And I will describe in the next videos how you can create this in other versions if need be. Okay? So for now, if you're a Microsoft 365 subscriber, try this out. All right. I'm going to go back to my expense tracker worksheet. And remember, our goal in this table is to fill out as we pay each bill. But to make it easier, we need to know the names of the bills from these three tables. So back to my expense tracker. I need to create the data validation. To do this, I first need a list of values for me to choose from. Well, you might think, Well, we've already got the list of values. They're right there, right? Can't you just pull those? Well, the data validation has got to be one consistent list. It can't be 3 separate ranges like it is currently. So back to expense tracker. I'm going to move off to the side, just someplace empty, and I'm going to create the list right here. I could put it on another worksheet, use that worksheet within my data validation, but for now, I'm just going to place it right here. Now, like I said, there's many different ways to do it. Here's one of them. So I'm going to create a formula. I'm going to say equals, because I'm creating a formula inside of Excel. And I'm going to use a function called toCol or toColumn. I'll hit my tab key once it's selected. So I got equals toCol, open parentheses, and now it's got 3 things that it needs from me in order for it to do its job. It's actually got 3 things, but only one of them, the array, is required. It needs to know where the data's at. What is it that you want? Now remember, our data is 3 separate columns. One inside the bills table, one inside the expenses table, and one inside the subscriptions table. So in order for us to grab multiple arrays or multiple non-adjacent ranges of cells, I'm going to open up another parentheses because we're going to put all 3 of them comma separated inside of a pair of parentheses. So with that second parentheses, I'll go to my monthly expense dashboard. I'm going to select the bill range inside that table. So from rent all the way down to your last empty cell, comma, then I'm going to grab the expense name inside the expenses table, comma, and now I'll grab the subscriptions name column, and I'm done grabbing my range. So now back to my formula. I got my toCol, 2 open parentheses. Once I'm done with all 3 of my ranges, I'll then close the parentheses. That's done for the array. Done. I'm going to close the parentheses again, and now I'm done with the toCol function. And I'll hit my enter key. And now I've got my range of cells. Look at that. All my data right there. Now, you might look at that and say, well, there's something off here. We got the names in there, sure, and we got a column of those values, but we got a bunch of zeros in there. Because remember, we grabbed even the blank cells. We grabbed all of them in anticipation that more data is going to be input into these tables. We want our formula to automatically update, but I don't want those zeros. Well, I'll get back to my expense tracker. If I go back to the first cell, I'm going to give it a double click, and I'm going to click into the formula. So we only used one of the parameters, the array parameter. But you'll notice the second one is called ignore. It wants to know what we want to do if the cells are empty. Well, we want to ignore it. So I'm going to go to the end of the formula, right in between the 2 closed parentheses. And I'll do a comma. I'm now inside the ignore, and I'm going to tell it to ignore blanks. Let's give that a double click. Puts a 1 in there. That denotes ignore blanks. I'll hit my enter key, and we've got our list minus the empty cells. Now, the nice thing here about this formula is it did all the work for us, combining those 3 columns into one, but also it's dynamic. So if I hop over here and I put in another expense, let's say I've got one for, let's say yard work. So I'll put that one in there. I'll tab over. Let's see, I'm going to budget $100. I'll hit my enter key. Now, if I go back to the original worksheet expense tracker, we've now got yard work in there. Pretty cool. This is the toCol function. If I click back into there, you can see the formula right there. Try this out. Let's get our list of all of our bills, expenses, and subscriptions into one nice little column. Try it out. Now that we've got our list inside of there, all utilizing the toCol function to create that one master column, now we can create the data validation inside of our expense tracker table. Now, to do this, I'm going to hop over to the expense column, and I'm going to select all of the cells within that column, all the way from B4 down to B39, or just above the total row label. Once you've got those highlighted, Those are the cells that we're going to apply the data validation to. Remember the little drop down that gives them the pick list to choose from one of those values. With that highlighted, I'll go to my data tab. All the way towards the right, we got a section called data tools. Inside of there, we got data validation. I'll give that a click. This opens up my data validation window. Underneath settings, I'm going to change the validation criteria allow from any value to a list. I'll select that. I'll go into my source, and now I'm just going to grab that list that we just created. So with that selected, I'll grab I3 down to I20, and I'm going to hit OK. We've got our list. So now if I go into the expense column, I got a nice little drop down there, and it lists out all of those values. Okay? It's something small, but this is going to help so much in inputting data into this list. This way I don't have to go back and forth. Oh, what other one did I put in there? Oh, phone, right. I got to go do phone. Oh, what other one? Insurance. Okay, I got to go do insurance. No, you've got the drop down that lists them all out right here. Now, here's something small, but once again, because I'm on the 365 subscription pack with Excel, there's another function that's going to help me make this even better. If we look closely, and you might already be thinking this, we could look at this list and say rent's at the top, and then there's water, and then there's garbage, and then there's gas. They're not in alphabetical order. I want to put this list in alphabetical order, make it easier to find things. Well, watch this. If I go back to my lists, remember our original list here that's using the toCall function. Well, I'm going to select the first cell in that list where my formula is at. I'm going to go up just after the equal sign, and I'm going to bring in the sort function. So I'll say equals sort, open parentheses. Now the sort function wants to know, first off, what's the array? What's the range or data that you want to sort? Well, that's where toCall comes into play. toCall in all those ranges, that's what I want to sort. So I'm done with the array. I'm done there. So equals sort, open parentheses. Let's leave the toCall right where it's at. I'm going to go to the very end. I'm going to do a comma. And now I'm inside the sort index. Well, the sort index represents, well, within that array, which column do you want to sort? Well, we've only got one column of data, just this guy right here. So I'll just put a 1 in there. I'm going to do a comma again. And now it wants to know, how do you want to sort it? Do you want to do it in ascending or descending order? Well, for my purposes, I want to do ascending. Give that a double click, and I'm done. I'm going to close the parentheses. I'm done with the sort function. I'll hit my enter key, and my list is now sorted alphabetically. Watch this. If I go back to the expense column, hit the drop down, I've now got that list in alphabetical order. Make it much easier to be able to find things here. Now, once again, toCall, sort function, they're newer functions. So unfortunately, if you're on 2016 or 2013 or 10 or some earlier version outside of the Microsoft 365 subscription, unfortunately, these functions are not going to be available to you. But I'll show you an alternative. It's a little bit kind of a workaround in the earlier editions, and I'll show you that here in a little bit. All right, if you've got it, try this out. Get your list, apply the data validation, and let's sort that list as well. Try it out. All right, our table is looking pretty good. We've got the headers, we've got rows of records in there, or at least rows ready for records. We've got the expense with the drop down in there, pulling from that list. But there's one little hiccup here that I want to make sure we tackle. Our lists, it's great, right? Grabbing the values from those 3 tables on the monthly expense dashboard so that we can create the data validation list, but it is lacking. And I'm going to show you where it's lacking at and how to fix this. Watch this. We've got our list. It's created, and we got the little drop down, and it lists out all of those values right there. Well, what if I hop over to the monthly expense dashboard for a moment and I add something? Let's say I add another subscription. So I hop over here and let's say we got HBO. All right, I'll hit my enter key. There's my HBO entry there. I'll go back to my expense tracker. Let's see, there's HBO right there. I go to my little expense column, my drop down here, starts at car. Remember, we sorted this alphabetically. And I go down and look, there's HBO. Everything looks good. If I scroll down now, my very last entry in here is now water. But if I look at my original list, my last entry is actually yard work. I don't want to do yard work anyway, so maybe it doesn't matter, right? We can overlook that. No big deal, right? Well, you know what? We should include it. We should put it in there. But our data validation list isn't dynamic enough to pull out new entries. I mean, it pulled out a new entry, HBO, but it pushed something off, right? It pushed that off the bottom of that list. Because our data validation, if I highlight all those cells again, data validation, it's looking at a literal range, right? I3 to I20. Yard work landed in row 21. So we need to make this more dynamic. We need it to pick up anytime there's a new entry here. The way that we're going to do this is by utilizing two functions as our source, this right here, inside of our data validation. We're going to use the offset function and the count A function. Now, if you haven't used the offset function or count A is pretty straightforward. We'll talk about that. The offset function's a little bit more involved, and I'm going to give you a quick introduction into the offset function. So let's take a look. So I'm going to hop over just to an empty cell, close that, find an empty cell here, and I'm just going to type in equals offset. I'm just going to use this visually so we can see what the function's all about. Open up a parentheses. Now, the offset function has it's got 5 things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 different things that it wants from us in order for it to do its job. Now remember, our main purpose here is to make our drop down reference this list more dynamically. So we need a way to make the range, remember A3 or I3 to I21, we need to make that more dynamic because it can increase, it can decrease in size. We need to make that dynamic. Well, in order to do that, the offset function will allow us to say, start at this point, that's the reference. Start at cell I3. Start right there. That's where you're always going to start. But then we're going to give it a height value. We're going to tell it, okay, you're going to go from I3 down to the last cell that contains data. Find that cell. Okay? So it'll say, okay, I3 is where I'll start, and I'm going to offset down till I get to this height. Now, we can't give the literal height. We can't say, oh, it's 20 rows in height, or it's 30 rows in height, because that's going to change, right, based on the other worksheets. So here we need to use another function that will count how many values are in that column. All right, and this is where the count A function comes into play. Let's try this out. We're going to put all of this together. But that's generally, in a little nutshell, just really quick introduction, that's the offset function. It says, where am I going to start? And how many rows, how many columns do you want? Or how high do you want this to be? Or what's the width of this thing? How big do you want it to be? That's the offset command. Let's try it out. So to do this, I'm going to select all those cells once again. This is what we want to change, the data validation for these cells. I'll go to data validation, and I'm going to wipe out the source here. We don't want that source anymore because that was a hard-coded, hard range inside there. We need it to be dynamic. So now I'm going to bring in equals offset, and I'm going to open up parentheses. Now, the first thing inside the offset command it wants to know is, where does it start? Where's it going to offset from? So I'm going to go grab the top of my list, which is I3. Yep, I3. I'll grab that. That's the reference point for the offset command. Then I'm going to do a comma. Now, unfortunately, you don't get to see the little screen tips inside this window, but I'm going to remind you. So the next one is the rows. It says, okay, I'm going to start here. Now, how many rows do you want? Well, actually, we can't tell you how many rows because it's going to change. So I'm going to leave that blank. I'm going to do another comma. The next thing it wants to know is, well, how many columns do you want? Well, once again, we've only got one column, but I'm not going to explicitly call this out. So I'm just going to do another comma. We're just going to leave them blank, and it'll set to defaults to whatever the function utilizes there. Okay. Next thing is, and this one we're going to use, is the height. How big is this range of cells going to be? Well, here I'm going to use the count A function. Now the count A function is now going to take a range and count how many cells are in that range that contain data. So here I'll say just the I column. Just grab how many cells, count how many cells we have inside of there that contain data. Oh, and actually before I do that, I should open up a parentheses for the count A. So now I'll grab the I column, and it just references I to I, which is great, because remember, this is going to change in size. Now I'm going to close the parentheses for the count A function, and I'm going to close the parentheses for the offset function. And I'm done. I'll hit OK. No errors. If I had an error in the formula, it would have told me right there. But now if I go to my dropdown, I start with car, and I end with yard work. Pretty cool. And if I go back to monthly expenses, let's say I add another bill here. Let's see, what do I not have so far? Let's say we got health insurance. I'll hit my enter key. Let's just drop that one in there. I need to increase the width of that column. I'll go back to expense tracker. There's my health insurance. It's in there. Yard work got pushed down one cell. But if I go to my drop down, starts with car, there's health insurance, and I still got yard work in there. So this is creating a little more dynamic. There's, again, a few moving parts inside of here, because now we got the offset function, and we got the count A to count how many values are in there, and how big that range from the offset cell should be. So try this out. Rewind the video, highlight those cells, modify your data validation list to utilize that offset command. Then I'll open that back up right there. Make sure you try it out. So I mentioned earlier the functions that I use to create the data validation list, to call and sort. Those are newer functions available through the Microsoft 365 subscription pack inside of Microsoft Excel. If you're on an earlier version, I mentioned we need an alternative, right? So we can do something very similar. Well, here it is. I'm going to walk you through how to create a pivot table that pulls the data from those three separate lists, the bills, expenses, and subscriptions, and creates a menu very similar to this that we could then use in the data validation settings. Take a look. So I'm still on the expense tracker worksheet. And I'm just going to pick an empty cell off to the right of that original list. I'm inside of the L column, but wherever you got an empty spot. So once I'm there, I now want to create a pivot table that pulls these three columns of data to create that one master list, one master column. Well, in order to create the pivot table based on separate ranges, I can't. You can't go to insert pivot table. It won't work. Sorry. It won't let you do separate ranges of data. But there's a hidden feature inside of Microsoft Excel that allows you to use the old, like I'm talking old pivot table wizard that will allow you to do this. But you got to get to this hidden feature through a shortcut key. Take a look. So again, I've got the L cell selected. On my keyboard, I'm going to tap the Alt key. And you'll notice that this opens up the menu commands at the top. Well, I'm going to press Alt and then the letter D, D like dog. Now I get a little screen tip that opens up and it says continue typing the menu sequence from earlier version of Office or press Escape to cancel. Well, the earlier shortcut that I now want from the earlier versions is P, P like pivot table. So I'll tap P and this opens up the pivot table and pivot chart wizard. All right. This is what Excel used to use. This was the default way of creating pivot tables way back in the day. Okay, but now we can get access to it through the shortcut keys. Alt D and then P, and this will open it up. So the first step wants to know, well, where's your data at? For ours, it's multiple consolidated ranges. So I'm going to select that. And I want to create a pivot table. I'm going to hit next. In step 2, it wants to know about page fields. Page fields are the filters within a pivot table. So I'm going to leave it just set, hey, create one of them for me, but we're actually going to remove it. So I'm going to leave it as is and I'll hit next. The next step wants to know, well, where's your data at that you want to consolidate? So I'll make sure I'm clicked into the range. I'm going to go to my monthly expense dashboard and I need to select each range. But a pivot table requires that you have at least 2 columns of data. So here, I'm going to grab B13 or my bill header all the way down to C30 or the bottom of the list in the C column. And I'm going to hit add. Now I'm going to do that 2 more times for my other 2 tables. I'm going to grab expense budget on down to the empty cells and I'll add it. And then one more time, subscriptions, name, amount, all the way down, and I'll add it. So now we've got our 3 separate ranges that we're going to consolidate into one list within a pivot table. Next. All right, last step, just wants to know where you want to place it. It should be existing sheet right in that cell you had selected earlier. And I'll hit finish. So now it creates a pivot table. We don't need all of this. All we need is the list that it created. So inside the pivot table fields window, I'm going to drag out the column. Don't need that. I don't need the page, and I don't need the values. I just want the row with all of our values right there. Pretty slick, right? We've now got a list very similar to what I did using the toCall function, but now it's just a pivot table. And pivot tables have been around forever. So anybody can do this with a copy of Microsoft Excel. But there's a little bit of cleanup I need to do here. One, I need to get rid of this blank. I don't want that. And 2, I don't need these 2 labels. So really quickly to get rid of these, first thing, I'm going to get rid of the blanks. I'm going to go to a little drop down here for row labels, and I'll just uncheck the blank option. Gone. The next thing I want to do is get rid of the label at the top and the grand total label. So to do that, make sure I'm clicked into there somewhere. I'll go to the Pivot Table Analyze tab and over to Options. Inside the Options window, I'm going to go to Totals and Filters, and I'm going to turn off the Show Grand Totals for rows and for columns. Get rid of those. Then I'm going to go to Display, and I'm going to turn off the option Display Field Captions and Filter dropdowns. Let's turn that off. I'll hit OK. And now I got a list just like the one I created here. So now all I need to do is select my expense column. Let's get all of that there. I'll go back to my data tab, data validation, and I'm just going to modify my offset command. Instead of the I column, I'm now going to reference the L column and whatever cell I started there. So I believe I started in L3. Then I'll say L3, and then I'm just going to change these 2 I's to L's because we're now working with the L column. I'll hit OK, and my little drop down still works. Got our data right there. So this is just one alternative. There's probably other ways to do it, but I love pivot tables. I love how quickly it did it, and you can reference your list from the pivot table inside your data validation. So if you need the alternative, try this out. If not, you got the newer version of Excel, you got the toCall and the sort function, you're golden, you're good to go. All right, otherwise you could try that out right there. All right, our table's looking pretty good. Your next step is start to input some records into this table. Let's try it out. So imagine it's now a new month. I want to start paying some bills, right? So I'll jump into here, go to my expenses. Let's say I grab my entertainment. I'm going to the movie tonight. I'm going to spend 20 bucks. All right, it's entertainment. So I'll grab entertainment. Let's see, today is 9/13/2023, and I spent $20, and we'll say movie night. I'll hit my enter key, and I've now input that record there. Let's try another one. Let's see, I got to pay my car payment. I'll grab the car entry. I paid this on the 5th and it was 150. And we'll just say this is, September car payment. All right, looking good. So take a moment and let's fill out a few records here. And I'll fill out 10, 20 records inside here. And let's pay a few of your bills, right? So in real world experience here, we cracked this open. We've paid a few bills today. We paid our credit card, our car payment. We're going to the movies tonight. I went to the grocery store and bought some food, whatever it might be. Let's start entering those expenses inside of the tracker table right here. Now, we've got the tracker table and we've got our monthly expense dashboard. This is what we set up initially. These are the bills I anticipate paying this month. These are the expenses I anticipate this month. These are the subscriptions I anticipate this month. But when it comes down to it, this is where you're going to fill out all the actual expenses for the month. Now, once you get a few records in here, we're going to jump into the next section, and we need to get these three tables to start pulling data from the expense tracker table. Okay? So we can get things like the actual and the difference inside there. So try it out. In this section, we're going to take a look at building the calculations, the formulas that will give us a return for our budget amounts. Take a look. So we've got the expense tracker table where every day you're going to come into here and say, oh, I paid this bill today. I spent this much on this category, on this topic, and so on. Right? This is where you put in what you actually spent. In the monthly expense dashboard, we now need to grab the actual amount that we spent for each of these bills, expenses, and subscriptions. The actual amount is going to say, okay, I need to know how much I actually spent for rent. I know I anticipated it was $900, right? But maybe the landlord bumped it up, or maybe the landlord lowered it. Could that happen? Maybe the landlord lowered it. So my amount that I expected was $900, but I spent $1,000 or I spent $800 on it. But that value will come from the expense tracker table. Let's say food, right? Food is one of my expenses, right? I need to get the actual amount. I budgeted for $500, but maybe I ended up spending $400 or $600. So I need to get that value from the expense tracker worksheet. To do this, we're going to utilize a function built into Excel called SUMIF. Take a look. So I'm going to do the bills table. So I'm going to go to my first bill there, which is E14, and I'm going to say equals SUMIF, and I'll open up a parentheses. Now the SUMIF function has 3 bits of information that it needs in order to perform this calculation. Now it's an if. I want to sum if this is true. I want to sum up the amount column from the expense tracker worksheet if the bill is rent. And then I want to do that for each of these. If it's water, sum it up. If it's garbage, sum it up, and so on. So here's my first one. Equals SUMIF, open parentheses. The first thing it wants to know is the range. Now the range represents it's kind of combined with the criteria, because we only want to sum up where it's rent. So the first thing we're going to specify the range. I'm going to go to my expense tracker and I'm going to grab this column right here, the expense column. Let's get all of that. So from B4 all the way down to your last empty cell right above total. And let's grab that column. That's the range that I want to look at. Now I'm going to do a comma. The next thing it wants to know is the criteria. Says, okay, SUMIF says, okay, I'm looking at that range. Now, what do you want me to look for? Well, after I do that comma, I get into criteria. I'm going to go back to expense tracker, I'm going to go back to monthly expense dashboard, back to the original list. Now you'll look that it put in the name of the worksheet, and I really don't need that. I'm going to delete those out, just get back to that comma that we input. And here, I'm just going to grab cell B14. Remember, look at this range, our expense range, but only do it where this is true, where it's rent. Then I'm going to do a comma. And the last thing it wants to know is Okay, I looked at that range, I found rent. Now what do you want me to sum up? So back to expense tracker, and I'm going to grab the entire amount column from that D4 cell all the way down to that last empty cell. I'll close the parentheses and I'll hit my enter key, and I've got my totals. So I can see here for total actual right now, I spent $900 on rent. Water was 20, should have been 40, right? And so on. 29 for garbage, 20 for gas, 80 for internet. Ooh, that went up on me, and so on, right? But it's looking at a range, matching if it finds one of these values here, and then we inform it which column to sum based on that criteria. This is your sum if function. Make sure you try this one out, and we're going to get the actual. And here's a little task for you, right? Make sure you also do it for the expenses and do it for the subscriptions. Right now, I've put the value in there for the subscriptions, but I'm going to delete those out. Those amounts should be captured back here, like Netflix, Disney, and whatever else you got. So let's use the sum if, and let's sum up those values based on the criteria. If you haven't used the sum if before, right, you can rewind the video, you can take a look at the process there, build that formula out. 3 little things. What's the range? What's the criteria? And what's the sum range? Try it out. We've got our first calculation in there. We've now calculated the actual amount spent based on the expense tracker table utilizing the sum if function. Here's our second calculation, and this is a simple one. We're going to find the difference. I just want to know the difference between the anticipated amount, expected amount, and the actual amount that we spent. So I'm just going to hop into F14 here for my bills, and it's a simple little formula, just a little bit of subtraction. So I'm going to say equals, I'll grab the amount minus the actual amount, and I'll hit my enter key. So now we can take a quick look. We can say, okay, for rent, the expected amount was $900. I paid $900. We have a difference of nothing. For water, we've got an expected amount of $40. I paid $20. Maybe my bill was lower that month, so we got a difference of $20 there. For garbage, I expected $30. It was actually only $29. I got a difference of $1. Ooh, if we look down here at internet, we had an expected amount of $45, but it was actually $80. Maybe I had some overages inside my bill, whatever it might be. So we got a difference of a negative $35 inside there, okay, and so on. So this is just a quick little simple difference calculation, just this subtracted by this, and you're good to go. So try this out one more time. Hop over to your expenses table, and let's create the same formula. Take the budget minus the actual, and you're good to go. Try it out. All right, our budget dashboard starting to come together here. We got 3 separate tables broken out by bills. We can see the bills that we've been paying every month, the amount versus the actual, and get the difference. We got the same thing for expenses, and we got our subscriptions table there. All 3 of these tables support our information, right? Support the bills that we're paying every month. And it's gathering all that data from the expense tracker worksheet, okay, which is actually grabbing data from the other worksheet so that we can get that nice little drop down here. Now, the 3 little tables that we have on our dashboard, they're great, but they're categorized, right? They're compartmentalized. They're bills and expenses and subscriptions, 3 separate tables. Now I want to get one master summary list that shows me how much we're spending for each bill, expense, and subscription, and it gives me the overall percentage for each of those bills compared to the grand total that we've spent. Well, to do this, we're going to build a quick little pivot table to summarize our budget. Take a look. Now, our 3 tables, they're 3 separate tables, and they don't all share the same information. For example, bills has a due date, expenses does not, subscriptions doesn't. Subscriptions only got 2 columns versus the 4 or 5 that the other ones have. So a pivot table based off of this isn't going to give us the proper results that I'm looking for. So I'm going to go over to the expense tracker table, and we're going to build a pivot table based off of this. So first step, I'm going to click into the table. Doesn't matter where, just as long as you're in there. I'm going to go up to my Insert tab, and I'm going to go to Pivot Table. All right, first thing, wants to know where your data is at. It should have already picked up your list, the expense tracker, or whatever you called the table. The next thing is it wants to know where you want to put the pivot table. Now, eventually, I want to place it on the dashboard. But for right now, let's keep it on New Worksheet, and I'll hit OK. All right, this creates a brand new sheet down here. We're going to move it here in a little bit, but for now, we'll work right here. Inside of our field lists, let's move that over so you can get it away from my big old head there. There we go. Inside the field list, I'm going to grab the expense, which is the name of the bills or expenses or subscriptions, and I'm going to drag that into the row section. Then I'm going to grab the amount, and I'll drag that into the value section. All right, so now we've got that nice little list there, all of our current bills that we've paid up to this point, and the amounts. All right, looking good. We got that blank one in there. Well, I don't want the blank, so I'm going to go to the drop down, and I'll uncheck the blank. Let's get rid of that. All right, well, let's get to that point right there. Let's build a pivot table based off of the expense tracker, right? Just that table right there, right here. Click into there, insert pivot table, put it on a new sheet, and let's get these two columns out there. Expense in the row and the amount inside the value section. Get to that point, and then we'll continue. So our summary pivot table is looking pretty good. We've got each of the unique bills that we've paid and a grand total that we've spent up to this point for each of those bills. Now, the next thing I want to do here is get a percentage. I want to know what our car amount, what its percentage is of the grand total. Well, to do this, we're going to modify our pivot table just a little bit. Back into our field list, I'm going to grab the amount field. We already grabbed it earlier. We brought that down into the value section, which gave us a sum, but I'm going to grab it a second time, and I'm going to drag that down below in the value section again. Now, at first glance, it's the same thing, right? We've got the sum amount and a sum amount too. Well, let's modify the second one. So I'm going to go down to the sum amount too. I'll give that a click, and I'm going to go into value field settings. Inside the value field settings window, I'm going to go to the show as values, or excuse me, show values as tab. And here, I'll change the show values as no calculation option to a percent of grand total. Percent of grand total. And I'm going to hit OK. And now we've got a percent for each of those bills compared to the grand total. So for our car payment, which was $150, that was roughly a 9% towards our grand total spent on our bills, and so on. So try this out. Just continuing our summary information, right? Those three tables that we have earlier, these are great. And at a glance, I can say, okay, these are my bills, and this is what I spent, and that's the difference, and there's our grand total. For expenses and subscriptions, same thing. But now I just want a quick glance, each of the bills, what we spent, and what its percentage is. And pivot tables are great for this visual. Quick summary information. So try this out. Get your pivot table, get your sum for your amount, and get a second sum in there, but we're going to modify it to show us the percentage. Try it out. All right, we've got our summary information all through an Excel pivot table. It's got the expense names, right? All the bills there. We've got the sum of the total for each of the bills, and we've got an overall percentage for each of those bills compared to the grand total. This is great, a quick visual snapshot of our bills, but it's on its own worksheet. Let's take a look at how we can move a pivot table to our dashboard. Take a look. First step, we're going to click into the pivot table. Then we're going to go up to the Pivot Table Analyze tab. And here we're going to find an option for Move Pivot Table. I'm going to go ahead and give that a click. Wants to know where you want to move it to. We'll do an existing worksheet. For ours, we're going to go to the monthly expense dashboard, and I'm going to put it right down below my bills somewhere. Maybe like B34, right? Somewhere down below there in a little bit of space. I'll hit OK. And we've now got our pivot table inside the dashboard. So now we not only see, and I'm going to close the pivot table fields list. I don't need that right now. We've got the breakdown for each of them inside their own respective tables. And we've got a quick snapshot summary of the sum of the bills and the percentage all in one spot. So let's get that pivot table from its own worksheet back to our dashboard. Try it out. So our pivot table looks pretty good. Again, quick little summary snapshot of our expenses. But I want to make sure that the pivot table, its formatting, matches the rest of our tables. So here, I'm going to click into my pivot table, make sure we get our pivot table analyze tab back. And if you need to, you can reopen the field list on the right-hand side. Let's get that back open there. I closed mine just to get it out of the way for a moment. But if yours disappears, click into your pivot table analyze, and open the field list. Now, first thing I want to do here is I want to change the way the amounts are formatted. Those are currency, and they should look like currency. So I'm going to go into my field list, into my value section. I'll go to the first sum of amount, give that a click. Then I'm going to go into value field settings. Inside the value field settings window, I'll go to number format, and I'm going to change this to a format for currency. I'll hit OK. I'll hit OK. And now we've got a nice format in there. The second thing I want to do is these header names here, right? Those are nice. Maybe we even just want to remove them, just get rid of them, or we can rename them, right? The choice is ours. If you want to rename it, for example, the sum of amount to, maybe we want to call that percent instead. I'm going to go over to my field list again. I'll find the sum of amount to, give that a click, value field settings once again. And here I'll change the name. I'll just call it percent. I'll hit OK. And now I've got my percent. Now, here's something that really bugs me about pivot tables. And you may have just noticed it, okay, because it just bugged me right there. Here, as soon as I changed that name, it shrunk the column automatically, and it shrunk this column as well. So now I got to go up here and I got to increase that size. But watch this. If I change something again, let's say I hop back into here, go back to value fields, and I change this name again. I'll just call it per. Just as an example, per. I'll hit OK. And it just shrunk it again. Hey, this drives me nuts. Drives me nuts. So if I get back into there, I call this percentage or percent. Right, there's my percent, but that column is still narrow inside there. So to change this, I don't want the tables to change formatting everywhere else. To make sure this doesn't happen, I'm going to click into my pivot table, go to the pivot table analyze tab, and I'm going to go into options. Inside the options window, let's see, this is under, I got to remember where the feature's at. There we go. Underneath the layout and format tab, you've got a check mark in here for auto fit column widths on update. You've also got preserve cell formatting on update. I'm going to turn off the auto fit. I'll hit OK. So if I change this, let's get that set up properly. So now you change something, right? I'll change this back down to per. I'm going to hit OK, and nothing updated. Okay. That's the way it should be, in my opinion. Okay? Especially when you got other data out there. It really should say percentage or percent, but we get the point. So again, that was click into the pivot table, options, go to the layout and format, and you can turn off the auto fit column on update. Okay? Something little, but it just drives me nuts. Now I got to go clean something up. All right, now this is looking pretty good. There's more that we can do with this. Let's see. Here's something else we can do. So the formatting, right? We've got some formatting there with currency. We could change the titles there, but also we want to make sure that the formatting matches the table formatting with the rest of our worksheet. So I'm going to close my field list once again. If I click into my pivot table, go to the design tab, you've got all of the same table formatting that we chose from earlier. So there's my original one that I chose, and I think I'm going to stick with that one. But whatever you like to do, maybe you want the tables to be blue and you want the pivot table summary to be green, right? We can do that. You can mix and match, but there's something to say about consistency as well. right? But totally up to you, whatever you like to do here. Let's do a little bit of formatting on your pivot table. Let's get the currency. Let's change the names if you like. And if you'd like to, you can change the table formatting as well. Try it out. So the last thing we did was build the pivot table to give us a quick summary of our bills and the amount as well as the percentage. That's great, right? Can it consolidate that data down into a single table and we can quickly look at that data. But now I want to make it even more visual. Let's create a chart that'll show off this data in a nice visual format. We're going to create a pie chart. So first step, I'm going to click into the pivot table. Doesn't matter where, just as long as you're in there. I'm now going to go up to my Insert tab, get into the Chart section, and I'm going to go to the Pivot Chart. Now we're going to create a simple pivot table, or excuse me, a simple pie chart based off this pivot table. So I'm going to go to Pie, and I'll grab the simple basic pie chart, and I'll hit OK. All right, and there's our pie chart. Pretty simple. Now, there's a few things I want to change about this. We're going to talk more in depth about formatting within a pie chart or within a chart in general. But for right now, because this is a pivot chart, it's got all these labels for the different sections of the pivot table. I don't like them. They take up space. So I'm going to right click on one of them and I'm going to hide all field buttons on the chart. That'll get rid of them. Everything else gets nice and bigger, a little more legible, a little bit more readable, a little more visual for us, not quite as cluttered. So like I said, we're going to talk more about formatting as we continue here. We're going to create a few more charts, but for now, we got a nice visual representing this pivot table data. So now quickly at a glance, I can look and compare the different slices of the pie and make some assumptions. If it's bigger, we're spending more in that area. If it's smaller, we're spending less, and so on. So try this out. Click into your pivot table, go to Insert, Pivot Chart, grab a pie chart, and let's place it on your worksheet. Try it out. I love charts. They're more visual, they're more impactful. It's not just raw black and white text and numeric values, but it's something we can look at and quickly analyze visually. The first chart that we created was a pretty standard chart. It was based on a pivot table, and we just picked pie chart. We were done. It grabbed all the data from the pivot table, and we were good to go. We're going to create another chart here, but this one's going to be a little bit more involved. This is going to be a custom chart. We're going to build this one actually from scratch. What we're going to get here is I want to create a column chart that shows me the budget versus the actual for each category. I want to know the difference between how much we spent versus how much we budgeted for bills, and I want to do the same with expenses, right? All inside of one chart. So this is going to be a column chart, but in order for us to create this, because our data is two separate tables, we need to customize it and build it ourselves. Take a look. This is going to be a budget versus actual bar chart. Take a look. So our first step is we need to create actually a chart object. It's not going to have any data in it because we'll customize that. So my first step is I'm going to click someplace empty to place the chart. So off to the right someplace. Sounds good. All right. Once you're out there, we'll go to Insert, get into the charts. I'm going to go into the column chart, and I'm just going to grab the default 2D column chart. All right. Not much of a chart, right? I mean, we didn't have any data selected. I was out here in an empty cell. So we just got back a blank, empty chart. I'm going to move it over there. Maybe I'll resize it here a little bit, just in anticipation of dropping the data in there. So now our next step is to identify the data that we want to include in the chart. Now we've got two tables that I'm going to work with. We got the bills and we got the expenses. So I want to see for bills, I want to see the amount, the budgeted amount versus the actual amount. And then I want to do the same thing for expenses. I want to see the budgeted amount versus the actual amount. I want to see those in bars, right, in the columns here. So to do this, blank chart, I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to go down to Select Data. All right, this will open up our Select Data source window. Currently empty, right? Nothing going on in here, but we need to create it. So for our legend entries, our series, we're going to go to add. All right, our series name, we're going to call this one budget. We'll start by grabbing the budget values. So I'm going to call this budget. And then for our values, we're going to say equal. And I'm going to go grab the amount, the budgeted amount value here for bills. That should be D31 or wherever your cell was at. And then at the end of that, I'll do a comma. And I'm going to go grab the budgeted amount for expenses. We'll grab that one. So we've got those two in there. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. All right. So this one here, it's a number 1. We're going to fix that here in a moment. But that represents the budgeted amount for bills. This slightly smaller one represents the budgeted amount for expenses. So that's the budget. But now I want to see the actual for both of these categories. So now I'm going to go to add again for the legend entries. And same thing, but now it's the actual. So actual, we'll wipe out this. I'm going to say equals. I'll grab the actual amount for bills. And then at the end of that, I'll do a comma. And I'm going to grab the actual amount for expenses. I'll hit OK. All right. So now we're starting to see a nice little chart here to show us that difference. Again, more visual, more impactful, quick visual, right? Kind of register eye test. We can see the difference. Now, our x-axis there, those labels aren't very helpful, right? Just a 1 and a 2. I want it to actually say bills versus expenses. So inside the horizontal category axis labels, right now we got the 1 and a 2. I'm going to go to edit and we're going to change this. I'm going to say equals open curly brace. So this is the curly brace, not the square bracket. This would be shift and the curly brace button. Then inside of quotes, I'll say budget, close quote, comma, and then inside of quotes again, I'll say actual. Nope, I apologize, not budget and actual. This is going to be bills, comma, expenses, quote, expenses. We already did the actual versus the budget. So this is just the labels. Close the quote, close the curly brace. Give you a moment. You can look at that there. So equals, open curly brace, and inside of quotes, bills, comma, inside of quotes, expenses, and then close the curly brace. I'm going to hit OK. Hit OK again. And now we've got our chart. How cool is that, right? It's not just a standard chart. We didn't just start out by selecting data, but because our data is in separate locations, not adjacent, right? Not connected to one another, we're able to still create that chart. But we have to specify, right? What's inside of your legend series? What's inside of your axis? What are your labels? And it'll build it out as you identify those pieces of your chart. So try this out. That was a few steps. Feel free to rewind, rewatch, get the segments that you need to, and let's build out your budget versus your actual chart. Try it out. We're going to create one more chart, another pie chart. We've created a pie chart for our pivot table that gave us summary percentages based off of our individual unique bills. We've created a nice little column chart here to show off the budget versus the actual for each of our categories. Now we're going to create a pie chart that shows us percentages of our actual spend for each category. Now, much like our column chart here, it's going to be a custom chart. It's not going to be one where we just select the data, pick the chart, and we're done. Okay? So it's going to take a little bit of steps here, but nothing big, very similar to what we did in the prior video. But the idea here is we're going to create a pie chart very similar to this one here, but it's going to use the individual actual spends for each of our 3 categories. All right. So first, let's click someplace empty just so we don't have any data selected. We want our initial chart to be blank, no data source. Then I'm going to go to Insert, Pie Chart, and I'll grab just a standard 2D pie chart. All right, and there we go. There's our blank chart. So now we need to identify where our data is at. I'm going to right-click that blank box, I'll go to select data. And now I get to specify first what our legend series is. So I'll go to add. And inside of our series values, we're going to say equals. And I'm going to grab the bills actual amount. And I'm going to do a comma. So that's the first one, comma. Then I'll grab the expenses actual amount, comma. And I'm going to grab the subscriptions actual amount. And we can give this a name. We don't have to, but we can give it a name. We can call this actual. And I'll hit OK. All right. So now we've got our individual slices representing those actual amounts that we've spent for each category, but we got that 1, 2, 3 again. So I want to change that. I want to make sure it says bills, expenses, and subscriptions. So I'm going to go over here to edit for our horizontal category axis label. And we're going to do that same thing again. We're going to say equals, open curly brace, open quote, and our first one is bills, close quote, comma, open quote. Our next one is expenses, close quote, comma, open quote, and then we got subscriptions. I'm going to abbreviate here. We'll close the quote and we'll close the curly brace. I'll hit OK. And now we've got our labels. I'm going to hit OK to my data source window. And there's a nice little summary for each category, but once again in pie chart form, showing us our overall spending, actual spending for each of those categories. Again, I love charts. They're very visual. At a quick glance, I can start to make some decisions and snap judgments. I don't have to look at raw text and numeric values to be able to make sense of things. But we've got that data, and that data is important, but now we got some visuals off of it. So try this out. Create a pie chart that'll show you the total spent for each of those categories. Try it out. All right, now we've got some tables out there with our raw text and numeric values and some calculations. And now we've got some summary visuals utilizing some charts. A couple of pie charts, a column chart. Dashboard's starting to come together. Now let's do a little bit of formatting. I want to format the charts, add some values, some data labels in there, legends, titles, whatever. Add some more visuals. Now we do want to be careful at this point that we don't go overboard on the visuals, right? Visuals are great, but if we start adding too much, then it just becomes clutter, becomes noise, right? And then we can become distracted by it. So we do want to be careful, but adding a little bit of formatting does go a long way. Let's take a look. So I'm going to use my column chart here as the example, and then I'll leave it up to you to get in and format your other charts. So I'm going to select my column chart, and the first thing I'd like to do here is add a title to this chart. So with that chart selected, I'm going to go up to the Chart Design tab, and on the far left, we got Add Chart Element. And from here, you got several things that you can add or deactivate from your chart. I'm going to look in here, I'm going to find Chart Title, and I'm going to put it above. So I'll go ahead and select that. It creates a nice little text box for me. It just calls it Chart Title. But let's call this, oh, come on. We'll call it Budget versus Actual. All right, so now we got a little bit more context for that visual element. So the bars here represent our budget versus our actual amounts. And we got our X labels there. This is our bills. This is our expenses. But now we got some additional text there to help lend context to our charts visual. Now let's see, what else can we do here? With the chart itself, typically, and this isn't something you have to do, but typically when I build a dashboard element page like this, I like to get rid of these grid lines in the background. I just think that they're noisy. They take up visual that we don't really need. So I'm going to turn them off. And this is going to lead us to the next thing I want to do with my chart. So to turn off that grid line, I'll go to my View tab, top of my screen, and there's a check mark in here for grid lines. I'll turn that off. Now I've just got this nice clean environment. But now what I like to do is with my charts, I'm going to remove the border. I really like the way this looks. And this is not absolute. We don't have to do this. This is more of a personal preference. You decide what looks best within your environment. So I'll select the chart. I'm going to go to my Format tab. I'll find the Shape Outline, and I'm going to choose No Outline. If I click away from the chart, just nice seamless graphic inside there, nice seamless visual element. If I could do that with my pie chart, I'll select my pie chart, Format, Shape Outline, and I'll say No Outline. And again, click away. I just love the way it looks. It's kind of just seamless with the rest of the graphics in there. Very cool. All right, so a little bit of formatting, like I said, goes a long way. Adding the title inside of there, removing the border, the grid lines in the back, right? Really, it starts to make those charts start to pop there. Something else we can do, if I select one of the values on the x-axis, so I want those to pop some more. So with that selected, I'll go to my Home tab, and I'm just going to bump up the font size. Maybe I'll go to 12. There we go. It's something small once again, but get those to stand out. Right? Maybe I'll do the same thing with the legend here. I can select the legend, and I can bump up that font size as well. There we go, making it just a little bit bigger for us. All right, now I said I was only going to do the column chart there, but the pie chart, I want to show you something a little more specific to the pie chart. If I select the pie chart, right now there's no values out there. With a column chart, we have your y-axis that shows you roughly where those columns land at within their values. With the pie chart, there's nothing like that. I can hover over it, but that doesn't do anything for me just visually at a quick glance. I got to use my mouse. Well, here with the chart selected, I'll go back to Chart Design, back to Chart Element, and I'm going to get into Data Labels, and I'm going to do a outside end. Now, default, we got some labels out there, but they represent the actual amounts, which is good. That's a good bit of information. But maybe I want the percentages. So here I'm going to select the actual pie. I'll just click once on it. I'm going to go back to Chart Elements, back to Data Labels, and I'm going to go into More Data Label Options. This is going to open up my panel on the right-hand side. If it didn't take you directly to it, you want to go to this icon here, your label options, and expand out the label options section. Here, value is checked, which is great. It's great information, but I'm going to uncheck it, and I'm going to grab percentage instead. Now, this is, again, a preference. Depends on what you're trying to message here. What visual do you want people to see? Or yourself, in this case, is your personal budget. Right? But I like the percentages. It fits within the theme of a pie chart. So, all right. So here's your task. We've done a little bit of formatting. Again, try not to go too overboard with it. We can create some separation between these and resize them and such. But hop down to your other pie chart. Let's do some formatting on that one as well, but I'm going to leave that up to you. So take what we talked about here, experiment, see what else you can do with the pie chart as well, and apply some formatting. In this section, we're going to start out by taking a look at what I'm going to call calculated callouts. Now, you might be familiar with shapes inside of Microsoft Excel, and a type of shape that we have is a callout. Take a look. If I hop up to my Insert tab, there's a section in here called Illustrations, and one of the options in there is Shapes. And there are loads of different shapes that we can take advantage of. There are basic shapes, things like rectangles and ovals and triangles and so on. There's arrows, there's equation shapes, there's loads of different shapes that we can use. They're essentially little graphics that you can throw it on your spreadsheet, right? People use the arrows to maybe draw attention to certain elements, kind of highlight areas within a worksheet. You might use a rectangular shape or an oval shape to drop text inside of, but they're essentially just graphics that you can then use inside your spreadsheet. What I'm going to use them as is essentially little boxes that we can put text inside of, but the text isn't going to just be static text. I'm not just going to type the name of the spreadsheet, like monthly budget, something like that. But it's going to have text in combination with the calculation. Something like this right here. This is just a simple shape. Go to your Insert tab, go to Shapes, and grab the rectangle shape. Drop it on your worksheet. The difference here is it contains text and it has a calculation in there. This calculation is summing up the actual values that we have across our 3 different categories of expenses. So we're getting a sum of the actual for bills, the actual for expenses, and the amount for the subscriptions category, all within this little box. I like using these shapes because they're graphical. There's something different than just dropping it into a cell, and you can format them in many different ways with many different types of shapes. Here I just use a basic shape, but like we just saw, back to Insert Shapes, you've got lots of different types of shapes that you can use, and a section that's actually called callouts. These would be like little bubbles that you would see inside of like the Sunday comics, right? With the characters speaking out of their head, that type of thing. So we got all these different types of shapes. You can drop just standard text into them. You can do calculations like we're going to see here, and you can do lots of different formatting with them. Now, for calculations to work inside one of these shapes, you actually have to create the calculation out inside of a cell, like this cell right here. You can see my formula bar. We've got a bit going on inside there. Okay? It's actually just a little bit of text, like total expenses, and then it's got a couple of functions in there that are doing the formatting and the summing, and it's got some concatenating character with a carriage return, or essentially a line break inside of the call out inside of the shape. And then we'll talk some more about that as we create this. But then once you create the calculation in a cell, you then reference that cell inside of the shape. And we'll take a look at how to do that as well. Now, this is just a quick introduction into what we're going to start the section out in. We're going to create a couple of little boxes like this to place some text and some calculated values and do some formatting with the shapes as well. So let's get ready and let's jump in. Now, before we create these calculated callouts or these shapes, I want to create one more table inside of our dashboard. This table is going to represent our income. Right now, everything we've worked with so far deals with money going out, right? Paying bills, our expenses, our subscriptions, whatever the bill happens to be. But we should have an area where we can denote how much we have coming in. That way we know what we're working with and we don't overextend ourselves, overspend. All right, so a simple little table. It's just going to have 3 little columns inside of it. I'm going to create this inside of C2. So first, my headers. I'm going to say I have my income or the income name. This could be a paycheck. This could be a side hustle. This could be whatever. Then I'm going to have a date as to when we receive that income, and an amount. All right, so just 3 little column headers there. I'm going to highlight those 3 and the empty row down below, and I'm going to format this as a table, just like we did earlier. So back to my home tab, format as table, pick your favorite color. Got my range. Yes, I have column headers. I'll hit OK. All right, and I'm going to expand that table out. Remember that little tick mark in the corner? Let's just go down a few rows. I'm going to say I have 3 different sources of income for a month. All right. Now I can do the same thing to this table that I did with my other ones. I'll go to my table design, turn off the filters, turn on a total row. I'll name the table TBL income, and that's good. I'll put a couple of records in there. Let's see, we're dealing with September, so I'll say on the 12th. Oh, excuse me. We'll have paycheck 1. This is going to be the name. Paycheck 1. Now, on the 12th, I received $2,400. All right, and I should format that. It is a currency. There we go. And I will have it inside the total row. I'll have it sum that up so we can get a total amount. And then maybe I've got a side hustle. And on the 16th, that side hustle brought in $500, right? Whatever it happens to be. So now we've got a nice little table in there just representing the income that we have coming in. Now we can know just how much we can spend within our various bills, expenses, and subscriptions. All right, so let's get that part done right there. Let's build that little table. Take a moment if you haven't already. Just 3 little columns, still a table, turn off the filters, name the table, turn on the total row, and put a couple of entries in there. Make something up, but get that little table built into your dashboard. So now that we've got this income table here, we're going to create our first calculated callout, or a shape that essentially references a cell, references a formula, and outputs the text in a nice visual element. Let's take a look. So first thing I'm going to do here is create a shape. We saw earlier, insert, shapes, and you got loads of shapes to pull from. For me personally, I'm just going to grab the standard rectangle shape, but do feel free to experiment. Grab an oval, grab a hexagon, a triangle, a star, one of the callouts, whatever you like. I'm going to grab a rectangle. Once you have it selected, you can move out to your worksheet, left click and drag, and you'll create your shape. Now, whatever shape you selected, it's great. It might look different than mine. If your formatting is different, totally fine. And we're going to change that. So whatever you got there, stick with it. Now that I have my shape, I now want to create the text that I want to have show up in that shape. Now, typically with a shape, you would create it and then give it a double click, and you could bang on your keyboard and put your text in there. The downside to literally just putting text in the box is it's static. Whatever you type in there stays in there unless you go back to the box and you edit the text. Here, I want it to be dynamic. I want it to say total income and then reference this cell right here so that we know how much income comes in. And if the income changes, then our box updates as well. Let's try it out. All right, so I'm going to get out of that box. Now, normally when I create a formula that a shape like this references, I would put it way off the worksheet. I would come over here and put it off over the side. That way nobody would bother it. Or I might create a whole nother worksheet, put it on there, have the shape reference that content, and then I would hide the sheet so nobody would touch it. Okay? So you got a couple of options there. The idea is you're creating something that your shape will then use, but people don't need to know what's happening behind the scenes. They don't need to know where that's happening. They just see the shape and they're good with it. That's what we want. So here, let's say, I don't want to go too far off. Let's say I do it inside the V column, just so I can see it there. I'm going to move my chart over just a little bit. So I'm going to put it in my V column just so I can keep an eye on it and watch my box. But wherever you put it. So here, I'm just going to start with an equal sign. It's a formula. And inside of quotes, I'll say total income. Close the quote, and I'm going to hit my enter key. All right, so now we got the total income value there. It doesn't look like much, but I want that text to show up inside this box. So I'll select the box. With this selected, I'll go to my formula bar. I'm going to type in equals. It's really just a formula. And I'm going to go select this cell right here. That's it. Hit my enter key. And now that text shows up inside the box. How cool is that? So now if the text inside of this cell changes, my box would update as well. Let's try it. So I'll go back to the V1, go back to my formula bar. Now I want to combine total income with the actual total income amount. So here, in order for me to combine this text value with a numeric value or a cell reference, I got to bring in the ampersand character. This is your concatenating character. It'll allow you to combine multiple values together. So I got total income, ampersand, and then I'll select this cell right here, my total income. I'm going to hit my enter key, and my box will update. I think that is so cool. We got this more graphical element now that we can then format, change colors, change size, lots of different shapes you can pull from that now references a formula or another cell. Try this out. Create a shape, insert shapes, pick one that you like, draw it out there, create your formula. Really simple like I did there. Equals total income inside of quotes, ampersand, and reference your total income cell. Then have your box reference that cell. Try it out. All right, I want to take my little call out box there. I want to take it a step further. It's getting there and it's pretty cool, but it doesn't look like much. If you look closely at it, we got total income 2,900. It's just all strung together. So I want to do a little bit of formatting with that text. First off, I want to create a line break. I want to make sure that total income is on its own line and then the dollar amount wraps down to the next line. So I'll go back to my formula, back to the V1 cell there, and I'm going to go to my formula bar. Now, right after the ampersand character, so we got equals, total income, ampersand, I'm going to bring in a function here that creates a line break. The function I'm going to use here is called char or car. I'm going to open up a parentheses and it takes one parameter from us. It wants a number. Now, the number represents what character you want to bring into here. And these are all predefined by Excel within this function. The operation or the character that I want is represented by a number 10. So I'll bring in another number 10. I'm going to close that parentheses and I'm going to put in another ampersand character. So we got total income, combine that ampersand with this function result, char 10, and then combine that ampersand with the table reference for our total income. The number 10 represents a line break. So I'm going to drop that, I'm going to hit enter, and we've now created a line break inside of our text. Total income on one line, 2,900 on the second line. Try this out. You're just going to modify your formula and bring in just this little bit right here. char 10 surrounded by the ampersand characters. Try it out. I want to do something else with this little text box. We got text and numeric value in there, but that numeric value is supposed to be a currency amount. So I want it to be formatted as a proper currency value. I want the dollar sign, I want the thousands comma, I want the decimal. It should look like a currency value. Well, in order to do this, we're going to go back and change something inside of our formula. We're going to apply the text function to format that value in a specific way. Now, before I change that formula, there's a function called text. And in order to format something, you have to know what the format code should look like. In our case, I want a currency format. So before I type this out, let's go take a look at what currency formats look like. So I'm going to select a cell. Doesn't matter where. We're just going to use it as kind of our little guinea pig here. With that cell selected, I'll go to my Home tab. I'm going to go into the Numbers section, and I'm going to hit the little Options button in the corner. Now, if you don't have an Options button, then we can go up into the little currency symbol, a little down arrow, and I'm going to go into More Accounting Formats. This will take us into the same window. What I'm going to do is go down to Custom, and here we can see all sorts of different formatting options to pick from. But they're represented by these characters, like the pound symbol, the zeros, the dollar sign, the comma. We've got a few different ones in there. And I believe if I scroll up here, you're going to see a load of other ones to pick from. Now, what I want to do is find one that fits my needs. For example, I'm going to grab this bottom one, dollar sign pound, comma, dollar sign, or pound, 0.00. I'm going to choose that one. So I'm just going to highlight that, and I'm going to copy it, and I'll close out of this window. Okay. All right, now back to my V1 cell where I have that formula. So right after the second ampersand, right before the table reference, I'm going to bring in the text function. So I got text, I'm going to open up a parentheses, and the text function takes two parameters, 2 bits of information that it needs. The first thing is the value that you want to format. In this case, it's that reference that we made to the table. At the end of that table reference, I'll do a comma, and then inside of quotes, I'm going to paste in that format that I copied earlier. Dollar sign pound, comma, pound, 0.00 inside of quotes. And that's it. I'll hit my enter key, and we've now formatted it as a currency. So cool. So watch this. If I come up here and I change one of my income amounts, which updates this cell, which then in turn updates this cell, which then updates our total income. So let's say my side hustle, oh, I was wrong there. I actually made $750. Hit my enter key, updated, updated, and updated. Pretty cool. I love these little text boxes because once again, you can format them however you like. For example, I'll select the box. I can go to shape format. Maybe I'll do a shape fill of just white. I like that white and blue theme that I got going on here. Maybe I'll do a shape effect and give it a shadow. Right? That's looking pretty good. Maybe I don't like the border. Maybe I'll remove the border. Let's do a no outline there. Yeah. And then maybe I'll select the shape and I want to change the alignment. I want stuff to be centered. So on my home tab, underneath the alignment section, I'll do both the center commands here. And I want to bump up the font size as well. Let's make that a little bit, oop, too big. There we go. And that looks pretty good. And we can move that around. You can change the shape of it, change the formatting, whatever you like here. Try this out. Get your box, create the formula. You can do the return, the line feed, the carriage break inside there. You can do the formatting with the text function. So let's get your total income out there and format it how you like it. Try it out. So there's two more little text boxes that I want to create here. We've got one for the total income, but now I want to create one for the total spent and the leftover, what we have left from our income versus our total spent. So let's do our total spent first. Now to make this a little bit simpler, I'm going to select the previous one, just copy it, Control C. I'll click someplace empty, Control V, paste that thing in. Now I've got my second box. Now that box, it's still referencing the same cell. With it selected, I can still see in my formula bar that it's referencing V1. Well, I need a new formula. So I'm going to change that reference from V1 to V2. That way it'll just be the cell directly below it. So now I want to create this box that gives me our total spent, right? What's our actual amount that we've spent across all of our bills? So here, with the box selected, it's already referencing that cell, V2. We're good there. Now I'm going to go over to V2, and I'm going to create the formula. So we'll say, first off, inside of quotes, we'll say total spent. Okay, good there. I'm going to scroll over. Actually, I'll just go to my formula bar here at the top. So let's make that a little bit bigger. All right, so total spent. Then I'm going to use an ampersand symbol because I'm going to bring in the char character. Remember the number to be able to create the line break? And we'll say 10. Bring in another ampersand. And here I want it to give me the total spent across all of the categories. So here I'll just say sum, open parentheses, and I'm going to grab the total actual for bills. Then I'm going to do a comma, total actual for expenses, comma, and then for subscriptions. I'll close the parentheses and I'm going to hit my enter key. And there's our total spent. Now I forgot one function inside there. So if I go back to that cell, we need to, right before the sum, we need to bring in that text function. All right. And here we'll do a comma. And then it was, let's see, it was $ pound, comma, pound, pound, 0.00. Close the quote, close the parentheses. I think I remember that right. And there we go. There's our total spent and a sum of all of our actual spent across our bills. And I want to increase the font size. What did I do? 16 there. So I'll bump this one up to 16 as well. Get that one done. So I just created a copy of the first box, had it reference the next cell down below, and here's our little formula right there. total spent, combine that with the line break, combine that with the text and sum to get your total expense across all your bills. Try it out. We got one more box we're going to create here. This is going to be for the income left, or what you have left over after your total income and your total spent. So now let's just copy this one once again. I'll move it over. Let's get things lined up just right. I want to create some equal spacing in there. Actually, I'll show off a tool here in just a moment. Get that spacing just right for us. So now this box is referencing V2. So I'll change that to 3. Just get the next row down below like we did earlier. And I probably don't need that to be too big. And now I want this one to say income left or leftover. And then I want to get the difference between our total income and the total spent. So hop over to our cell here. We'll say equals income left. Yep. And then I'll bring in the ampersand. We'll bring in our line break with the char or car character function and the number 10. We'll bring in another ampersand once again. Now it's going to get a bit different. I need to get our total income reference and then subtract our total spent. So here, just after the second ampersand, I'll grab reference to our total income, and then I'm going to subtract, I'll bring in the minus sign, the sum, open parentheses, of this cell, comma, this cell, comma, this cell. And I'll close that parentheses. And then I want to format it. So we will do just before the table reference there, just after the ampersand symbol, we'll bring the text function back in, open a parentheses, and then at the end, comma, quote, and I'll do that formatting that we did earlier. $, pound, comma, pound, pound, 0.00, close the quote, close the parentheses. A lot of moving parts inside of this one. That formula is getting quite big. I'm going to hit my enter key, and we've now got the leftover income. So let's bump up. That goes to 16 to match the rest. Oh, wrong one. Let's select that box, bump that up to 16, and that looks pretty good. Yeah. Pretty nice. Again, I love these little boxes just for their visual impact and the ability that we can move them around and do what we like with them. Now, I want to make sure that there's equal spacing between these cells, between these boxes. So if I select each of these boxes and I'm just holding down the control key on my keyboard, just selecting each of them, I'll go to my shape format, and we've got some arrangement commands here. I'm going to go to align, and I'm going to distribute horizontally. And you saw that one move over just really slightly there. But now they look like they got equal spacing. Let's make sure that they're aligned. I'll select them all, go back to my align, and I'm going to say align to the top. Ooh, I don't think anything moved. So I think we're actually looking pretty good there. Yeah? What do you think? Again, I love them. You do so much with them. If you pick different shapes other than a rectangle, great. Do some really fun things with them. Get the formatting and the different types of shapes. So make sure you got all three of them: total income, total spent, and the income left, and get those calculations nailed down and have your boxes reference them. In this section, we're going to take a look at a handful of features here that are going to help us polish this all up. Get those final little things to finalize our personal budget template. The first feature that we're going to take a look at here deals with conditional formatting. Let's take a look. So I'm going to tackle the bills table first. I want to highlight any records in here where the difference value is a negative value. If it's negative, then I want to highlight the row a specific color. If it's positive or anything else, then I just want to leave it alone. Negative, highlight that one. So our first step is I'm going to highlight all the rows underneath this table. So I'm going to grab from rent all the way down to my last empty row there. Now with those cells selected, I'm now going to go to my Home tab, and over towards the right, we'll have conditional formatting. Now here, there's loads of different types of rules that you can apply. What I'm looking for here is actually a formula to apply that'll act as our condition. So I'm going to go down to Manage Rules. This will open up our Conditional Formatting Rules Manager. And in here, I'm going to create a new rule. All right, inside of our new formatting rule, I'm going to grab the option that says Use a formula to determine which cells to format. And then for my formula, I'm going to say if this cell right here is less than or equal to, let's make sure my less than or equal to 0. If that's true, then I'm going to go to my format and I'm going to change the fill color. Let's see, I'm going to go with this kind of pinky red color here. All right, actually I'll go with orange. Orange and blue, those go good together. And I'll hit OK. So before I continue on here, I need to modify the cell reference. Remember, I selected all of these rows. I don't want to just compare every single row against F14, but I wanted to use a relative reference and go to the specific cell it should for the row that it's on. So I'm going to click into my F14 there, and I'm going to delete the $ next to the row reference, next to the 14. You can leave the $F, that's fine because the column's not going to change, but I'm going to delete the $ in the 14 reference because the row is going to change. I'll hit OK. I'm going to go ahead and apply. And now anything that is equal to 0 or less, it should have highlighted it. What do you think? Yeah, I think I'm going to change one thing about it. Looking at that now, I think formulas equals F14 less than equal to 0. I think I'm going to do just less than 0 because here I had 0, but I paid the exact amount. So I'll highlight that rule. I'm going to go ahead and edit it, and I'm going to go ahead and remove the equal. We'll just do less than 0. I'll hit OK, apply, and now I'm feeling better about that. Right? Only the ones that are actually in the negative have highlighted as orange. I'll hit OK, click away from that. Pretty cool. If the values change, if this actual went to 45 or less, let's see, that's internet. So I'll go back to my expense tracker. Let's find internet here. I'll put it right at 45. And if I go back to my monthly expense, that has now updated, no longer highlighted. Conditional formatting. So we got the first one. Your assignment now is apply the same rule, but now to this range. If that cell is less than 0, then format it. Try this out. The next feature we're going to take a look at here deals with the overall formatting of the Excel workbook we're working in. Now, as we've been going through and creating tables and shapes and charts, we've been using a default theme, or essentially formatting within the document. Now, when the 2003 version, or 2007, earlier on, the Office Suite, Microsoft introduced this concept of themes. And themes deal with the overall formatting. Now, what we can do is now change the theme and have it update your entire content. Take a look. So like I said, I've chose blue. I've dealt with the default colors for my charts. This is true on my expense tracker as well. Default, I picked the colors. So now I decide I want to change it. Maybe blue's no longer my thing. I want green or orange or purple or whatever. So I'm going to go up to my page layout tab, and the first section on there we have themes. If I go to the little drop down of themes, you've got loads of options to pick from. If I just hover over them, you'll see them change the look and feel of my content, all by just editing or changing the theme. Loads of options to pick from. You pick your favorite colors. I still like the blue one. Maybe I'll end up sticking with that one. Green looks pretty cool. I like that one. Yeah. But you find one that fits. Ooh, I actually like that one. I'm going to go with that one. What was that one? Droplet. Let's grab that one. I'm going to grab Droplet. But you pick it. You get to decide. And it changes everything within the workbook. If I go to my expense tracker, we've updated that content. Yeah, we've updated that content as well. It'll look the same. I like that blue color. All right. So the themes, page layout, themes, and you got loads of options. Now I do want to point something out here. If you find that some area of your document actually didn't change, when you apply formatting, let's say to the background or to the font, as long as you stick within these theme colors, those will update based on the theme you choose. But if you pick from a standard color, those are standard. Those will not change no matter what theme you switch to. These are the standard colors that come in every copy of Microsoft Excel since I can remember. So stick with the themes. That way you can update on the fly, get new colors. Maybe do a different color for every month. I don't know. Could be cool. Try it out though. Go to your page layout tab and try changing your theme. Now, one more thing here to put a little bit more polish on this workbook or these worksheets. We've got a couple of columns that have helped us out, but we don't want to display them to the users. So I want to hide those columns. For example, on the monthly expense dashboard, we created those 3 boxes, right? Those 3 shapes to create some dynamic content and a nice visual. Well, in order to do that, we use the V column to set up the formulas and then had those boxes reference those cells. But users shouldn't see that. All they need to know is we got the 3 boxes right there. So I'm going to hide it. I'm going to select the V column, I'll right click, and I'll hide it. Gone, right? Users don't even need to know that it exists. Same thing on the expense tracker. I'll hop over the expense tracker. We got these 2 columns here, or you may only have one of them, but I want to hide them. Users don't need to know about them. They're just there to help us with the drop-down menus, right inside of the expense column of the tracker table. So I'll select the I column, right-click and hide it, and I'll do the same with the L column, or wherever you've got them, or one of them. So we'll just get them out of sight. Users shouldn't even be worried about it. They should just focus on the tables that we've created. So try that out. Get in there and hide those 2 or 3 columns, whatever you got inside of the workbook. So the last thing we're going to do with the monthly expense dashboard and the expense tracker worksheet is turn them into a template. Every month, I want to be able to create a brand new Excel document based off these 2 worksheets. But when I create that brand new document, either of the worksheets, they shouldn't have any data on it, right? I don't want to see any of September's data when I'm working in October. And I don't want to see any of October data when I'm working in November, and so on. So we're going to turn it into a template so we can reuse it, but we need to clean it up first. All right, so back into our document. Just so we don't lose any of the hard work that you've been doing, let's make sure we save. Just Control S on your keyboard. Let's nail that down because we're going to come back to this document. This is the personal finances -01. You can ignore the COM in there. I put that there for myself. It's my active document. I'm working on this one. So I just wanted to identify it. But you've got your personal finances -01 file. Let's make sure you've got that saved. Control S. All right, now that we've saved that, we're going to create a copy of this file that we'll then use as our template. So I'm going to go to my File tab, and I'm going to go down to Save a Copy. Now, just FYI, on my copy of Excel, I have the autosave feature turned on. That's why mine says Save a Copy. If you don't see Save a Copy, you probably don't have autosave, or at least it's not turned on. So you'll see Save As. Either option is going to work for what we're doing here. So now I'm going to change the file name. I'm going to call it temp-personal finances-01, and you can do the same. And more importantly, I'm going to change the file type. Right now I'm working with an Excel workbook, the most common type of file you'll work with inside of Excel. But I'm going to change that from the standard Excel workbook to an Excel template, .xltx. So save it as a template. That's what we want there. All right, let's see. Now, I'm noticing something here. It's happening on my system. It might be happening on yours. It may not be. Typically, when you change the file type to a template, Excel automatically changes your path, your file path, to a template folder. Mine didn't do that. It's still looking at my Excel personal finances folder exercise files. And that's not where I want to save the template. We shouldn't want to save it there. We want to save it inside of the Office templates folder so it's easy to find and create new documents based off of that template. So I can see here that, oh, we recommend another folder for the type of file you've selected. Great. If you see that, hit the Go to Recommended folder. If you don't see that, it may have already done it. So you can look at the path, and it should look something like this. I'm going to go ahead and hit the Go to Recommended folder. It should be your Documents Custom Office Templates folder. That's what we want. So I'm going to make sure we got our temp file, Personal Finances -01. It's an Excel template, and I'll save it. All right. Auto saves to your changes, saves your changes as you make them. Okay, great. Got it. This workbook contains external data. I can't think of where it contains external data. We didn't do anything externally, but let's see. Do you want Microsoft Excel to clear the data before saving the template and then automatically refresh the data? All right, yes, that probably deals with the pivot table that we created. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes. All right, so I've now got my template file, but it still has all of the previous month's data in there. So on the monthly expense dashboard, I'm going to clean it up, get it ready to be a true template here. I'm going to delete out the income data. So the income name, the date, the amounts. Inside of the bills, I'm going to get rid of I'm just going to get rid of the dates. That's it. I'm imagining that each month will have roughly the same bills. So to save me time, I'll keep the bill names in there. And I'm going to do the same with the expenses. I'll delete out the budget column. Let's just get rid of those values. Subscriptions is good. All right, let's see. I'm going to go to the expense tracker worksheet, and I'm going to delete out all the records from this table. We shouldn't have anything in there because the next month we want a nice clean tracker ready for us to put in that month's data. I'll go back to my monthly expense dashboard, and I'm going to refresh the pivot table because that should be empty. So I'll click into there, go to the Analyze tab, and I'll refresh. All right, nothing in there. Boop. Good. All right, so I've still got amounts inside of here because those are left over from the previous month. But once again, save me some time. I could delete them out. Maybe I'll do that. I'll delete them. Kind of a preference. If you figure that each time rent's always going to be the same, internet's always going to be the same, you could keep them, but I'll get rid of them just to clean it all up here. So now we've got a nice fresh document, right, with a little bit of data in there, but just stuff to help me out, ready for the next month. So I'm going to make sure I save this. Control S. All right, once again, that external data, yes, I want to do that. And now I'm going to close it because I'm going to create a brand new document based off of this template, ready for the next month. So I'll close this, File, Close. Great. So now I'm going to create a new document based off of that template. So if you need to reopen Excel, go ahead and do that. Then you'll go to your File tab, New, and we should now have an Office template as well as a Personal template. Personal showed up because we saved our template to the folder, the Office Templates folder on our computer. So I'll select Personal, and there it is. Temp Personal Finances -01. I'm going to go ahead and select that. Creates a new document. It's called Temp Personal Finances -011, but I've got a brand new document based off of those two worksheets. Ready for next month. It's empty, blank, ready for me to start dumping in the new month's data. Now, I just noticed something. One more thing that we should have cleaned up. I'm going to close this. You could do it if you like to, or you can just watch me do it here. I'm going to close this file. I'm not going to save it. But I am going to go back to File and open, and I'm going to open my template file. This is the one that's inside of my custom office templates. I need to modify something about the template. Our template should only have the expense tracker and the monthly expense dashboard. That's it. So I'm going to get rid of this sheet 2 that I think was left over from our pivot table. I'll delete that. I'm going to delete out the payment calculator. I'm going to delete out the investment calculator and the data tables. Just get rid of those. We'll talk about those later. They're still inside of our original file, so we'll go back to that one when we get to that point, but they shouldn't be inside the template. So once again, I'll save that. Yes, I want to clear it. I'm going to close it, file close, and now I'm going to create a new document based off of that template. So I'll go back to File, New, go to my Personal again, and I'll grab my Personal Finances template. And there it is. Only those 2 worksheets ready for me to put my data in. So I could start dropping in additional bills. I could start doing the due dates, the amounts, and so on. Then I can hop over to the expense tracker. Let's say we've got the rent. And this, I paid this one on, let's see, we're now inside of October. So I'll say 10/1/2023, 900. This was October rent, and so on. As I'm entering records there, we'll start to see our document come to life. So I could drop in my income here. We'll say paycheck. And I received that one on the 12th. And it was for 2,400. All right, there we are. We're starting to come to life here. Our pivot table, we've got data, so now I can refresh that and start to get that new data. Let's see, let's go back to my expense tracker. Let's see, I spend some money on food. Then I did this on the 6th. I spent $300. And once again, back to my worksheet here, and I'm starting to see the data come to life. I'll refresh the pivot table again. There's my food. There's my chart, my bills versus actual. I don't have any actual or budgeted data inside there. So let's say this is due on the 6th, by the 6th for $900. And we're now starting to populate that data. I'll budget $500 for food. And my nice little dashboard here is starting to come to life with my next month's data. So try this out. It's a template. You save your original document, get it all set up, right? Hide the stuff that users don't need to see, delete out the data that shouldn't be in there, and save it as a template. The next time you want to use it, File, New, grab your template, and you're good to go. Try it out. All right, so we've got our dashboard created, we got our expense tracker created, and we've saved it as a template. So now every month, you could do a File, New, and create a brand new document for that month based off the template that we just created. All right, start to get our expenses under control and start to understand really where our money's going. We could track it all right there. All right, we're gonna switch gears. In this section, we're gonna talk still about our finances, but we're gonna talk about 2 functions inside of Excel that are gonna help us when we go to take out a loan and as we perform investments. Let's take a look at the first one. We're going to talk about loan payments through Microsoft Excel. So let's get back into our original file. Let's get back into that personal finances -01. You can ignore that right there. Find that file. You can do File, Open, and it should be in your recent list. But let's get back there. All right, once you have that file open, let's go into the loan payment calculator. Now I've created a couple of simple little tables here for us to work with. We've got the loan calculator section where we've got an amount for the loan, an interest rate for the loan, the number of payments, and the monthly payment field. Now I've also created some calculations here that are already set up that'll show us, once this is filled out, what the total interest paid over the lifetime of the loan and the overall total paid interest and principal. What did we actually pay after the 5 years or 7 years or whatever we set up the term for? Off to the right, we've got a table that's going to break it down for each payment so you can see exactly what is happening. All right. So first off, amount. Let's just imagine, right? Some loan here. I'm going to say I'm out going to purchase a new car and I'm going to spend $32,000 on that car. So I'm going to say 32,000 is going to be my present value, the initial value for my loan. And you see that our table started doing something there. It's not quite done yet. Our interest rate, I don't know. They're kind of all over the place today, right now, as of this recording. 4% would be a deal at this point. So I'm going to say, you know what, maybe I qualify for a 6% interest rate for that $25,000. The number of payments, right? We can set up the term there. I've created a nice little drop down using data validation like we talked about earlier, right? I can say I'm going to have a 36-month term, 48, 60, 72, or 84. Let's say for now I'm going to say 60, so a typical 5-year loan for a vehicle. Now here's where the magic comes into play. The monthly payment. That's what I want to know. I want to know how much I'm going to spend every month for a $32,000 loan at a 6% interest rate for the next 60 payments. 5 years. All right, every month we got a payment due. What is it? Well, built into Excel, we have a function called payment, or PMT. That's the name of the function, PMT. It's payment. So I'm going to hop into my D11 cell there, and I'm going to start to create this function. I'll say equals PMT. Look at that. There it is right there. I'll give that a click, and it opens up the parentheses, and now I can see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 potential things that it needs in order to do its job. In reality, we're only going to use the first 3, the rate, the number of payments, and the present value. So for the rate, I'm going to grab the D7 cell, and I'm going to divide that by 12. It's an annual percentage rate, so we're going to divide that over 12 months. Then I'm going to do a comma. The next thing it wants to know is NPER, or the number of payments. So here, I'll grab D9. That's good to go. Right now we got 60 payments, comma, and then PV is the present value of the loan. So I'll grab D5, that 32,000. And that's it. I'll close the parentheses, hit my enter key, and it figures it out for us. So for the next 60 months, for a $32,000 loan at 6% interest rate, we're going to be paying roughly $618 a month. Now it's red, it's in parentheses because it's denoting it as a negative value, but I can change that. I'm going to go back to my formula here of cell D11, and just after the equal sign, just before the function name, I'm going to put a negative sign, just a dash in there, hit my enter key, and it'll turn it positive for us. I do that because the rest of the calculations rely on a positive value. So now I can see not only are we going to be paying roughly $618 a month for that $32,000 loan at a 6% interest rate for the next 60 months, but total interest at the end of that 60 months or 5 years, if you just make the bare minimum payment, $618.65, we're going to pay a total interest of $5,118.98. So an additional on top of the present value, that $32,000 original loan that we took out, we'll pay an additional roughly $5,000. We can see here that our final amount with interest and the original principal will pay $37,000 for that car. That's crazy. It's crazy, crazy, crazy. Off to the right, we've got a table there that's going to give you a breakdown of each payment that you make. So we got month number 1, we got the original $32,000 there. Our payment is $618. Principal, what goes towards principal on that amount is $458, and what goes towards interest is $160. It gives us a balance after that payment towards principal. We have $31,541. And then it continues month 2, same deal. We're slowly chunking away from that. And then down here at the bottom, finally get to that 60 payment, and we roughly owe $3 in interest. but our payment will take over and finish off that loan. So pretty cool. But this is the payment function, PMT. Just three little things. The interest rate divided by 12, because it's that annual percentage rate. We got the number of payments, whether it's 60 months, 72 months, 48 months, whatever, and the present amount, the present value, and it'll figure out the monthly payment for us. And don't forget, if you want the positive, we just slap that negative sign at the beginning, and it turns it into a positive value for us. There's our payment. Try this out. Jump into there, drop in an amount, pick an interest rate, pick your term, your number of payments, and use the payment function to find out what your monthly payment will be. Try it out. All right, we just took a look at the payment function that allows us to find out the monthly payment based off of a present amount, or the principal amount, the term, the number of payments, and the interest rate. And that's great. Taking out a loan, you can find out what you're going to be paying monthly. Now let's take a look at what you can get through an investment. If I set up an initial amount that I have to invest, I've got an average interest rate that I anticipate making throughout the years over a set number of years. I've got the term, how long my investment's going to grow for. It's going to be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever. And I can find out what I may end up with at the end of that time. This is called the future value function, or FV. Let's take a look. So I've moved over to the next worksheet. I'm on the investment calculator worksheet, and it's got a few little fields for us. We need to set up the initial amount that we have. So imagine I'm just bright-eyed, bushy-tail out of college. I got my first job, and I've got a little bit of money that I can now start to invest, start as my initial amount. Then every month, I'm going to contribute additional money towards that investment. So first off, got my initial amount. Let's say I got $100. That's what I got. I'm going to take that $100, then I'm going to throw it at the market, right? Throw it into a 401k, or I'm going to throw it into a high yield savings account or a CD or wherever I'm going to invest this at. So I've got the initial 100. Now, depending on where you're placing this money, interest rates are going to fluctuate, right? If I throw it into the stock market, they may range from a high value, 10 plus, they may go down to a very low value. Okay, so that's going to be kind of all over the place. But an average return might be something around 7, 8, 9% over the lifetime of your investment. If you invest for 20, 30, 40 years, we can expect an average return of roughly 7%. So let's stick with that just as our example here. We get to set up the term, how long this is going to last. How long is our investment going to go for? Right now I got 60 months in there. But let's say I'm going to do it for the next 20 years. So I believe that's 240 months. Let's do some quick math here. 240 divided by 12, 20 years. All right. So for the next 240 months, right, 20 years, my investment is going to go through. Starting with $100, I expect roughly a 7% return for the next 240 months. Now, every month, I want to continue to contribute money to the investment. So let's say every month I'm going to put $100 in there. Okay. So now here comes the magic. I can currently see, I got a little formula down here that tells me that if that's all I do right there, that's it. I've contributed $24,100. That's just me with my initial amount, adding $100 every month for the next 240 months. I've got roughly $24,000. Now, but I'm putting it into an account that should be getting interest on top of my money. So here's the magic. Inside of cell D13, I'm going to create a function utilizing the FV function. So I'll say equals. I'm going to use a minus sign next because remember it's going to come out negative just like the payment. So I'll do the negative sign. I'll do FV open parentheses. So here's our FV, or future value function. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that it wants from us. We're going to use 4 of them. So the first thing it wants to know is the rate. So I'll grab D7. I'll divide that by 12, comma. Wants to know the number of payments. We got our 240 or 20 years later, comma. Wants to know the payment, how much you're going to make each month. That's going to be our additional $100. And then comma, what's our present value? In this case, we start out with $100. I'm going to close that parentheses. I'll hit my enter key, and there we go. So starting out with $100 at a expected 7% return for the next 240 months, if I continue to add $100 every month, we will end up with $52,496 at the end of that 20 years. Now, we can see through the couple of quick calculations here, this is what we contributed over those 20 years, $100 initially, $100 every month, roughly $24,000. But then with the 7% return over those 240 months, we can expect somewhere around $28,000 in interest on top of our money for a grand total of roughly $52,000. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. The next 20 years. Well, what if I did this for longer? Let's see, we got 20 years inside there. What if I do it for 25 years? So 240 is 20. We add 5 more years to that. 60 months is 5 years. So the 300, right? 25 years. Whoop. All right, what just happened there? We just went up. Was that roughly $30,000? We're now contributing $30,100 initially with 100 every month, putting $100 additional. We've now racked up $51,000 in interest and contributed roughly $30,000 for 25 years. What if I go 30 years? Right? So this is going to be 360. I'll hit my enter key. Ooh, look at that. This is just initial $100 every month for the next 360 months. That's 30 years, right? What's the standard age range for working, right? If I start working in my 20s somewhere, let's say I start working full-time job at 24. 30 years later, we've got 24, 34, 44, 54, 64. No, that's 40 years, 30 years. 34, 20, 44, 54. So 54 years old, if I started this at 24 years, I would now have $122,808 roughly with these numbers right here. Okay, that's pretty cool. Well, let's see, what did I say? That was 54. What if I go for 10 more years? So retire at 64. Well, let's see, that would be 420, 480, right? 480. Now I've got $264, $112. Let's just make sure my math is correct here. 480 divided by 12, 40 years. So if I do this consistently for 40 years, that's what my numbers could potentially look like. I've contributed just over $48,000 to this prize, but I've amassed a load in interest. And we hear a term, when you get into investing, we hear a term called compounding interest. And that's what's happening here. Okay? The longer our money can sit there and the more years that go by, we're going to continue to add to it, but then build interest. And then that interest each year will add additional money through the interest, compounding that interest every time. Our money, making money, making money, making money. Okay? Pretty cool. And that's just $100 every month for the next 480 months. That's a long time, 40 years. All right. Now, what if I bump that up a little bit? What if I say, okay, I started out with 100, right? But every raise that I get throughout my career, I'm going to add a little bit more to it. So let's say instead of $100, I do $200 every month for the next 480 months. Now I've got just over $500,000, right? Unfortunately for me, I joined the game late. At 24 years old, I was still picking my nose, trying to figure out what I wanted to do, right? I wasn't contributing. I wish I was, right? And I wish I had created it or made it a habit. Just invest it, forget about it. And over $500,000 4 years later. and you've contributed just under $100,000. But it's the interest, that compounding interest, right, over the years, that's really going to get to you. Okay? Can only imagine if you jump that number up even higher every month, right? What if I do $300? What if I do $400, right? We want to make sure we can afford whatever it is that we're investing in there, but we're going to continue to increase that amount. So try this out. Jump into the investment calculator worksheet and drop in some numbers. Use that FV function to find out what your future investment will look like. The next topic that we're going to take a look at is going to borrow from the two functions that we were just looking at, the payment function and the FV or future value function. Now, something I like to do is I like to run numbers like this that we just did, where I can say, okay, initial amount, this expected interest rate, this term, these number of months, with this continual adjustment every month, I'm going to continue to invest this amount, and I find a number. Hey, that looks cool. Well, what happens if I change the interest rate? What if it's at 6%? What if it's at 9%? Then what happens? What if I change the monthly investment amount? What if I change that to $400 a month? Or go back to $100 or whatever it might be, right? I've got all these moving parts that I get in there and I want to adjust, and I want to see what happens to this number right here. Well, we've got what are called data tables. And data tables essentially set up scenarios for us inside of calculations like this right here. I want to substitute the monthly investment amount. What if I do $100? What if I do $200? What if I do $300? What if I do $500 a month? Then what happens? And I want to see all of those different scenarios. This is where a data table comes into play. Now, there are two different types of data tables inside of Excel. There's what's called a single variable data table, where you can substitute a single set of values, such as the scenario I just gave you. We got the formula, and now I want to substitute a bunch of different monthly investments. What if I do 100? What if I do 200? What if I do 300? What if I do 400? What if I do 50? Right? What happens? That's a single variable data table. But then there's also what they call a multi-variable data table, where you can set up two different sets of values. So in this case, I could say, well, what if I do this monthly investment at 100 versus 200 versus 300 a month versus 400 a month? And what if I adjust the term, right? Is it 480 months? Is it 360 months? Is it 200 months, right? What is it? I want to substitute those two different sets of variables of data. These are data tables. Take a look. I'm going to move over to the next worksheet, data tables. It's blank because we're going to start this from scratch. So let's just say I'm going to hop over to the B column, and let's say I've got $100 of initial investment, okay? And I'm going to expect a 7% return. So I'm going to say 0.07, and I'm going to do this for the next 360 months. And I'm going to continue to contribute an additional $100 every month. So I'll say 100, just like we did earlier. Okay? Let me zoom in here a little bit. So there's my numbers. There's my initial. Here's my interest, my expected return. Here's my how many months, and then the what I'm going to contribute. What am I contribute here? Okay, every month. Did I spell that right? Contribute. That'll be my monthly contribution. So now I'm going to create the formula. I'll move over here to the D2. And I'm going to say equals minus sign because I want the positive return. FV, open parentheses. So now I'm going to grab the rate. We'll divide that by 12, comma. The number of payments, 360, comma. Payment, $100 every month, comma. And my present value is $100. I'll close the parentheses, I'll hit my enter key, and roughly $122,000 I'll get back at the end of that investment, 360 months later. What is that? Let's do some quick math here. 360 divided by 12, 30 years later. All right. So now, like I said, I want to see what happens if I change the monthly contribution. What if I do $100 or $200 or $300 or $400, right? Every month. How does that change this number right here? Well, I could sit here and just change it, right? 100. Well, let's do 200 and I can see the change. No, let's try 300, right? And I can see the change. But unfortunately, now it's like, oh, wait, what was it before? How much did it increase? What's happening here? What was it at 200? What was it at 100? And then I got to go back in there and change it. What was it at 100? What was it at 200? Right? And I'm making those adjustments. Instead of that, we're going to create a single variable data table that'll do this for us. All right. I'm going to move this formula over just one cell. I'm just going to drag it over. And here's why. In order to set up a single variable data table, it has to be set up a very specific way. We got the formula. That's good. In the column to the left, down one cell, I'm leaving that cell empty there. Right here, I'm going to put in the list of values that I want to substitute. So I'll say 100 versus 200 versus 300, 400. Maybe I can do 500 a month. I don't know. But I want to see what the numbers look like for all of these. I'm going to substitute these values into this spot right here, the contribute portion of our formula. So remember this formula, it references all these cells. Our data table is just going to take this list right here and substitute each of them into that section where we're going to contribute. So next step, we've got the data table set up. Now I'm going to select that little table there. I'm now going to go to my data tab. I'm going to go to what if analysis, and I'm going to grab data table. All right. So now for our data table, it has a row input cell and a column input cell. Essentially, it wants to know where you're going to take these values right here and where you're going to input them over here. So for us, we got a column of substitutions of alternative monthly contributions. It's in a column format. I'm going to go to my column input cell and I'm going to grab the B5 cell, which this formula references. I'll hit OK. And there's my values. Let's just format that to make it easier to read here. Home, turn on that currency, and there we go. So at $100, right, we're making $122,000 roughly. At $200 a month, we're going to make, at the end of the investment, $244,000. With $300, we got $366,000. For $400, we got $488,000. If I was able to do $500, we got $610,000 at the end of the 30 years with an initial investment of $100 at a 7% return. This is a data table. It's going to save you time. You don't have to monkey around with the values, changing them and remembering and changing and remembering them. You set up the data table, start with the formula, start next with your list of alternative values, select it, data, what if, data table, and you'll set up, in this case, your column input cell. Ours going to take this column of values and replace it or input it here, and it calculates it all for us. Very cool. Now, let's take it a step further. What if I want two different sets of variables? I not only want to do the months, but I want to be able to talk about I not only want to do the contribution for the months, but I also want to see the difference in the months. What if it's 200 versus 360 versus 420 versus 480 and so on? What happens then? Well, same idea, but the data table is set up a little bit differently. This time, I'm going to create the formula right here. Same exact formula. So here's our rate divided by 12. Here's our number of payments. Here's our payment amount. And here's our present value. All right, same return, same formula. But this time, directly below that, I'm going to set up one set of variables. This will be the dollar amount, my contribution every month. So I'll just put a few of them in there. All right, that's the first one. The next one, the second set of variables, is going to go into the row to the right of the formula. This will be the months. So let's say I do 200 months versus 360 versus 480 versus, I don't know, versus what's 60 there? That's 30. 540? Is that right? All right, and so on. All right. So this is very specific. You have to set up a multivariable table just like this. We got the formula in the corner, one list of values, substitutions down below, and the other list of substitutions just to the right of that formula. So now, just like before, we'll select that list. We'll then go back to data. What if data table, and we're going to set up both the row input and the column input. So for column input, that's going to be these guys right here. That's going to get substituted right here. That's what our formula references. For the row, which are these guys right here, that's going to be the months. You ready for this? I'm going to hit OK. And there's our values. Let me just format this to make it easier to read. There we go. So for the next 200 months, $100 a month, we would have $38,000. For the next 480 months at $400 a month, we would have just over $1 million. That's pretty nice. Whew. Nice little table, builds it all out for us. What do you think of that? Single variable data table versus a multi-variable data table. Save you time with all sorts of scenarios. No longer are we getting in there and adjusting numbers and seeing what happens to the formula. It does it all for us. Try this out. Just hop over to the blank worksheet, data tables, create your initial values, and try out the single and the multi-variable data table. All right, once again, congratulations on completing the course. I'm going to drop a little present right here for you. I've got the completed file that I built out as we went through the various lectures here, and I'm going to place it right here inside this lecture. Look for the resources button, and you can download the completed version of the workbook. This is the one that I worked on, so if you want to use it as a reference, you want to use it as your template, you want to get in there and mess around with the payment calculator or the investment calculator, whatever, I've created it. This is the exact file that I created working through the lectures of this course. So once again, congratulations, and if you like, you can download it attached to this lecture right here. I'll see you in the next course.